Welcome to the Rings of Power podcast. We are the Lorehounds, your guides to Tolkien's world of Middle-earth. I'm David.
I'm Grand Elf. Yeah, I'm John.
And I'm Marilyn. This is our coverage for the final episode of Prime Video's original series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 8.
We're going to start off with our hot takes, and then we will get into a detailed scene-by-scene breakdown of the episode.
If you'd like to contact us, send emails to lotr@thelorehounds.com. If you want to join our Discord server or support the community by subscribing on Supercast or Patreon, check out the link tree in the show notes below.
And of course, if you are not into recurring subscriptions, but you would like to support the podcast and the community and all that we do, you can find a link to our season pass. Even though the season is over, you can still pay $10 as flat one-time fee, and you will have forever access to the ad-free versions of this podcast and all of the lore casts and the show guide, which we lovingly handcraft every week to give you bonus material for what's going on in the show.
And we use artisanal keyboards.
Yes.
Come on, you gonna get 2 Starbucks, or are you gonna get to click on a picture of Grand Elf?
Right. Why don't we just jump right in?
Stop saying it. It was painful enough.
To our hot takes.
Never gonna let this one go.
Is Grandel's heart bigger than his feet?
No.
Marilyn, what's your hot takes?
Well, before I get into my hot takes, I just wanted to say that this has appeared in a couple of servers and whatnot in discussion, but from episode 7, I really, in my role as an historian, wished that I pointed out that the river mud really would not have allowed any armies to run across it the way we saw, and never mind dragging siege engines behind them. And I'm using as an example the Battle of Agincourt in 1405. It was a plowed field, so very muddy and chunky, whatever, but it had been raining on it all the previous day, and it was just a sea of mud, and the charging knights on horseback fell in droves. And then when they struggled to get to their feet to confront each other, they just fell over if they didn't, fall face first and drown in the mud. So they were really playing jazz hands with that river bottom mud and whatnot. Of course, if it was rocks, it wouldn't have been a whole lot better anyway, right? But they would have done better just to leave the river in place and have them quietly building boats to sail across. But since Peter Jackson had already done that in a previous movie, maybe they just decided to ignore physics.
Sometimes you just gotta do stuff for the show.
Yeah, you do. But as a medieval historian, I just felt I needed to point that out.
I don't know. There's some debatability there. They did. I did see the siege, the Ravager, as they call it, which that historically I think is more suspect than trying to cross a dried riverbed. But anyway, is this our pyroclastic flow moment?
No, it's not. It's nowhere near as severe, right?
I guess it all depends on your background, doesn't it?
I think this is nowhere near as severe, and plus, I mean, look, this is a cinematic universe. I'm going to say that has elves skating on their shields. So, whatever. It's fine.
Anyway,
we can talk about that too, but I will talk about my hot takes instead.
Yes.
I will talk about my hot takes instead.
Yes.
Definitely an action-packed final episode. And there was one particularly poignant surprise event that I absolutely didn't see coming. And a boss battle I didn't really need, but okay, end of the season, you gotta have a boss battle, I guess. I'm glad that they left us in as much of a good place as they could at this point in time, and they addressed most of the plot lines. So I really didn't feel like I was dangling over a cliff with anybody, and I appreciated that because, we don't know how long it's going to be before they start up next season. There were many things that were beautiful and evocative and powerful, even if I would have made some different choices, but, that's okay. And there's so much about fathers and children. It's really kind of interesting. True. Once you notice it, it just comes at you from all directions. I wish they could also have had mothers and children, but in this case, they only have dead mothers so far, which is certainly in keeping with fairy tale tradition. But alas, Tolkien just simply didn't write all that many women characters to begin with, so there just weren't a lot to draw from. So,
can I just say on that point, so somebody had requested in an email at some point, I don't remember if we addressed it on air, that I add a section to the show guide where I divide the characters by canon and non-canon. these are primarily non-canon characters, like by a wide margin. And so they absolutely could have added female characters. So I think I'm going to blame the showrunners more than Tolkien on that one.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I guess they figured they didn't have time to show, parents and children when they were little children. It was mostly the parents of the kids who were, adult and active and whatnot.
Right.
More or less.
Well, go on anyway.
No, that's it.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I cut things short, I'm sorry.
You didn't. I'd gone through my list and eager to hear what you guys have to say.
John?
David, you make pancakes. You tell me a lot.
What?
You gotta keep stirring the pancakes until there's no more lumps in it. They didn't do that with this episode.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
There were lumps all around.
I thought we were back to the river mud again.
But, just watching this episode, I think there was a lot of really good stuff in it. I also think there were parts that made me cringe out of my skin.
Ow. Sounds painful.
It does sound painful.
Not a pleasant experience.
That's true. I was writhing on the floor like Celebrimbor today. No, I think that it had so many good parts, and I think it wrapped up a lot of the plot lines really satisfactorily, but I think that they are just way too attached to homages to Peter Jackson.
Oh, here.
And I've heard that criticism before about this season and the show in general. I'm usually in the camp of, Peter Jackson was the first Lord of the Rings content I ever consumed. And I'm usually on board with the whole, actually, that's not true. I watched the animated movie for The Hobbit first. But anyway, point is, that was my first big thing, right? That was the first thing that got me into this world. So I'm usually fine with all the Peter Jackson references you want. But it was so heavy-handed this episode in a way that made me go, all right, tell your own story. Just tell your own story. For the love of God, tell your own story. For the love of Eru. And so I just wish we were able to break away from that. I did feel like some plot lines just resolved a little clumsily. We'll talk about Gandalf when we get there, but my God, they are just determined to give Gandalf the worst line of the season every season.
Yeah.
From last season's I am good.
Yeah.
To this season's, I suppose they're going to call me Gandalf. And I don't know what it is about writing this character, but they cannot get the dialogue right.
Well, I'll have much to say about that very topic when we get there. So,
But anyway, just on positives, I think the dwarf stuff, other than parts of the Doranbane stuff, very good. I really enjoyed how the elf stuff all worked out. I really enjoyed the confrontation between Galadriel and Sauron. Really great stuff. Celebrimbor's dialogue was fantastic. I thought that was there were really good lines dropped at various points, especially from the Dark Wizard, which I'll get to later. So, a lot of good stuff. Mixed bag. Overall, successful finale. I am excited for season 3. That's all I want to say. David.
Yeah. I am not far off from either of you. The first time I was actually feeling a little under the weather when you guys recorded the Lorecast or the feedback. I forget which podcast.
Did both?
Yeah, but which night? I'm trying to remember which night. And while you were doing that, I was like, well, let me try to do my job and as a podcaster. So I was like, I'll watch episode 8. And I found myself drifting and looking at my phone and kind of feeling odd and uncomfortable. And I was like, is this because I'm sick and I don't have the mental capacity to really focus on what I'm seeing here? Or is this because the show is not firing on all cylinders? So then today, when I did my second watch and my detailed notes, and this has happened on other shows in the past, even I think in this season a little bit, scene by scene, everything's pretty good. On paper, it's all there. It all makes sense. All the resolutions make sense for where we want to end up and where we want to leave things off to start season 3. And somehow, and I was wondering, because one of you said this in our private chat, was that it was so Jacksonian. And I was like, was it like they oversalted it? And then that's what sort of soured the broth is it's just got too much salt in it and it sort of threw everything else off. And I was like, and then was some of the fight choreography off? Was the the dwarves have shown up and they have machine gun crossbows, and obviously they're going to have a mechanical crossbow, whatever. It's all good. But it was just there were like you said, John, there are lumps in the batter, and not everything was fully stirred in. So I'm just kind of left like, well, I don't know. It was fine. It wasn't horrible. Like it didn't break anything. It didn't break canon. It wasn't like Ahsoka where we were like, wait a minute, we were going in this one direction and then you did a 180 and then you moved us back the other direction. And that doesn't make sense. It felt a little long, which again is a Peter Jackson tradition.
Oh, yeah, having several endings. Yeah. and honestly, a Tolkien
the film,
right? That's in the original Lord of the Rings text is having several of these endings.
It absolutely is. Yeah. And having so many threads.
You even have an extra one that Jackson cut of the Scouring of the Shire.
But this is on screen. Right. This is on screen is, right. We've got to find that balance. We have to, do the shippy test and like, okay, are we getting to what we need from the core message to make it work on screen? It was 108 minutes, this episode, according to my, checking the time code on our thing. So yeah, I think I'm with you guys where I'm like, there's a lot of great scenes, a lot of great dialogue. Pretty happy with the season overall. We'll have a whole season wrap up, and we'll get into our whole season thoughts. And I just kind of felt like a little bit left down after episode 7 because episode 7 just was on fire, and and episode 8 was just kind of like, not sure what we're doing here. I'm not sure how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah, after episode 7, I thought to myself, as long as they land the plane here, we're okay. For season 3. Like this was a good season. If they give me a clunky finale, I'll be fine. Oh, and they gave me a clunky finale, right? Yeah. Like it's a little clunky, but it's got some good stuff. It's got some not so good stuff. I think that it does set up a lot of good stuff for season 3. And I do appreciate that there were no major what will happen cliffhangers, because I think that's extremely frustrating when people do that.
Particularly when you have to wait 2 years before you get any answers.
And like particularly when there's books to tell you everything that's going to happen. Like, don't give me like a what will happen cliffhanger. That's so stupid.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's true. I like your analogy, David, of the salty soup. I think, PJ is a very strong flavor, and a little goes a long way.
A little. I think, Marilyn, you've summed it up nicely. A little goes a long way. I don't need 5 or 6 different lines. What orders, my Lord Sauron? What was another one? I don't want to get all negative. I've got notes on them later. But I think you're right. I think a little goes a long way, and I think they went too far.
Yeah. I have one.
Which is the first time I've said that this season.
It is.
Yeah. Same with me. I think this because I've been fine all season. Crossed that threshold.
Yeah.
Yep. They definitely crossed a threshold, particularly with one scene that I was really looking forward to, and it just completely wrecked for me. So.
Oh no. But
it took me down.
Yeah, it took us down. Right.
It really took me down.
But we'll do a season wrap up. We're going to combine a final feedback and our season wrap up all in one. So please send in your thoughts to lotr@thelorehounds.com.
And be prepared for a 3-hour episode. Right?
Thank you again to all of our season pass and regular subscribers. You have made this a really successful season for us. We're really happy. We're really, this season has been a game changer for us as a podcast in more ways than one. And your support with the season pass has really given us a lot of courage. The circle of light has expanded because of all of you season pass holders.
Should I sing my song?
Do you have a song? Okay.
You didn't listen to the podcast then, David.
I am 3/4 of the way through. I had to take my daughter to
I did it in the first 3 seconds, so I don't believe you now.
Oh no, did I?
In the circle of light.
Oh, you did. Yeah, I didn't really. That was more of a. That wasn't a song.
Ignored it and
it's
moved
just
on.
A vibe.
I thought you did a whole song.
Well, if you want to hear more, you'll have to get on the Lorecast.
Exactly. And for the Lorecast, just a reminder, last episode was Courage and Circle of Light. See, I'm not calling it Northern Courage. I listened. I heard you, John.
I just wanted to put it in context.
I think you absolutely should have. Absolutely. Watch out for the coconuts.
I was looking for another word too. So
yeah.
Didn't want to be restrictive.
The one before that was on Uruks. Before that, we did the politics of Numenor. Before that, Bombadil. And then before that, Maiar. And then up next, Marilyn, is...
on Fairy Stories and New Catastrophe.
if you want to find out what eucatastrophe is, you could look on Wikipedia, or you could come listen to the Lorecast.
You could do both, but I think
Marilyn,
you like the Lorecast more.
You brought that up in the season 1 wrap-up, I think.
Right.
When
Did I?
you came on, when that was one of your first podcasts with us, full podcast. I think you came on and you were like, eucatastrophe.
What?
The whole thing.
I didn't. I had no catastrophe.
You catastrophe, me catastrophe, we catastrophe.
As always, a quick reminder, we're watching screeners, so we don't have subtitles or titles for the episodes. There's nothing to spoil ahead because this is it. And again, Nancy is going to be... Is Nancy on vacation or is she on vacation after?
She is on vacation.
She's on vacation.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So we're
on our own, guys.
We're on our own.
Oh
my
gosh,
God.
we have to do our own jobs.
What are we going to do? And we will be on the other end of the emails compiling those. And so please get them in. Voicemails, use your voicemail app on your phone. Use the website, little app, if you go to lorehounds.com or use the contact form there. We would really welcome. There's a lot of garbage out. There's garbage on the internet? J'ai surprise.
Shock horror.
But then I also know that there's a lot of people who are really enjoying that. And I think, again, in that idea of having courage and expanding the circle of light, send in your critiques, your thoughts, your opinions that that further the dialogue and the conversation and the fellowhood, the fellowship of this this pretty cool television show. I mean, it's been a great season so far. So
I think so. So far, it's over. It's
What?
over. There's no judging it so far anymore, David.
don't
It's
tell
over.
me.
This season, yes.
It is. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, enough of all the blah, blah. Let's get into the scene by scene.
Let's do
All
it.
right. We start off with Durin's Bane. Durin IV confronts his father Durin III and begs him to remove his ring. The king refuses and digs through a wall into a large cavern with veins of mithril. Durin the Younger looks to be at a loss for words, until the Balrog, an ancient spirit of fire, attacks the two Dorans. Durin the Older removes his ring and bids a fond farewell to his son before attacking the Balrog. When the two clash, the entrance to the Balrog's lair collapses.
So, yes, Marilyn, what do you...
This was so perfect. The only thing that I objected to was where's the army of dwarves that was fighting that Prince Durin had to not send out his army to Eregion for to counteract.
Question.
That's a good question.
That was a really weak point for me. Having gotten over my disappointment with all that, I loved this. I absolutely loved it. Classic determined courage moment here.
Yeah,
I mean, talk about, knowing that you're going to be toast, literally, and doing it anyway, because that's the thing to do. I loved the final scenes of this father-son interaction. I just thought it was great. I never let you lift your hand. It was you getting stronger. I mean, such affirmation from a father to a son. So great. So great. And interesting that he did finally take the ring off.
Yeah.
And leave it on that ledge there. So it's like, okay, what was he thinking about that ring at the end? I mean, I think he knew that it had changed him and altered him.
Right.
But then why didn't he just take it with him so his son wouldn't corrupt it?
John, did you cue my little music or my little clip there?
I have whatever you put in here.
Yes, play it now, please.
All right.
I feel the good in you, the conflict.
Oh my God. Yeah. There's some Star Wars here. There's some Harry Potter later. We'll get into that.
I don't know the Harry Potter.
Marilyn knows. She's done scholarly work on Harry Potter. I saw it on her website.
Yes.
I read the first book once, I think, and that was about it.
I come from the Harry Potter generation, so there was no escaping it for me.
That's true.
Gen, I talked about Gen HP, so I think you do qualify, John. The only other thing was interesting, like for the first time in 2 seasons, it occurred to me that the Dwarven crown is a teeny bit reminiscent of Morgoth's.
Yeah,
maybe they learned the 7 smithing secrets and Sauron reforged it like
pokey
that.
like that.
Right?
There was a lot of mithril that was down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm confused. Well, I guess it was mithril, but at one point I thought it was gold, but maybe that's just because of the golden color of the fire of the beast that was...
Yeah,
no,
I think it was mithril.
Yeah, because it was kind of silvery blue.
Yeah.
That's right. At the beginning, it was Silvery Blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The destiny of Durin.
Yeah. So what'd you guys think?
John?
I didn't like when he said "fly, you fools." No, I think it was a little Jacksonian, but it was fine. It was fine. I don't think I was quite as enamored with the scene as you were, Marilyn.
Okay.
But I think overall good. It did feel like a bit of a heel turn at the end for Doran the Third, in a way that I wasn't expecting. One thing I'll say, defending why the dwarf army wasn't there, I like to think Doran 4 was like, hey, let's not all go in there with blades first. Let me deal with him first. Son, Doran to Doran. And then if you guys need to take care of it after we're both done fighting, fine. Right? I think that feels very dwarvish to me, right?
Yeah, but I think they're talking about all, he slaughtered my people and there's dead bodies everywhere and, we're about to fall apart here. And then it turns out being, 4 dwarves total?
Yeah.
That confused me. And yes, the very first scene the first image that we see of the Balrog was total Peter Jackson. I did have that, but I kind of.
I mean, it is Durin's Bane, right? It is the flame of Udun, a nameless terror. Is the name. How is it a nameless terror if it has a name? Anyway, it is the same.
Balrog is like the Balrog is like its class of being, right? There are many Balrogs,
right? Exactly, age. And this one was Durin's Bane. That's the name of this one, which is in the movie and here.
Because
I don't think they don't call it Durin's Bane here, do they?
No, they don't. But that's what we know it now post Jackson.
Yeah. Well, but also, so the whole thing with the Balrog, I don't think we talked about this season because we talked about it in season 1, is that they've moved it back in age, right? So Durin's Bane does not become Durin's Bane until the Third Age when, I don't want to spoil too much because it's in between this and Lord of the Rings. But anyway, there's a Balrog incident in the Third Age that really makes it Doran's Bane because Doran to Doran to Doran to Doran to Doran is the king line.
Got it. Okay.
But they've kind of messed that up too because lore wise, there were other people between two Dorans.
Yeah. Fair enough.
This is where I think. In the moment, I had, when Durin 3 is, leaping out there in that final act of courageous moment, which is, I don't know, nobody's going to do anything to this Balrog. So, like, why even try? Okay, fine. The one thing that I do agree with you with Marilyn is that this is the one place where I'm feeling the hand of the writers trying to create this dramatic tension between, it's a grand elf's dilemma, a trolley dilemma again, right? Like, do I go with my friend or do I, do the right, or do I protect my people or what have you? And I think they create a false mechanism here, which is like, oh, I've got to keep an entire army back for what? So that I can go into a little cave tunnel, right. So this feels to me like the writer's joke, and then we get a dramatic moment where the dwarves sweep in and save the day. Woohoo! And it just it feels writery. It feels like they're taking some standard writing mechanical pieces and doing this, and I think it didn't work in the end for me.
What they could have done simply was just to have the elf come staggering back and say, Doran is in mourning, he's not coming.
There you go. Yeah.
And
they could have moved
skip all
forward.
This nonsense about this army, that army, whatever.
Right. Right. I mean, at the same time, I got feels between the father and son stuff.
Exactly.
This idea, I loved this question of strength versus power. And I'm breaking it that way just because I'm not using the word strong twice, but strength versus power. Strength to wield the weapon, but not powerful enough to use it as you're intending. Yeah, I can lift the axe, but do I actually have the willpower to, swing it at the person that I'm swinging it at?
Yeah. And also in the last scene of this whole episode of the season, we get this whole dichotomy of light versus power, right?
Exactly.
So I think that perhaps comes into this scene as well.
And I was glad that we had the shore opening music in this final episode.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Okay.
Oh, another thought I had too, which I thought was interesting with the whole thing with the ring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is Durin's destiny, and he says, you know, that it's our mountain, and
Yes.
and Durin the Fourth says, no, you didn't teach me that. You taught me that the mountain is the mountain, and then we get to, and that really brought forward to me the question of power of versus power over.
Yeah.
Yep.
The ring gives them power over the mountain.
Nice.
But with the ring, just normal, like we have to work with the mountain. We have to
It's
listen
power
and
with.
sing and power with. The mountain needs the power, and we're just sort of, you know, we're farmers. We're miners instead of farmers. We have to work within the seasons and the way that build the right things and da-da-da. So yeah, I thought that brought that theme forward nicely.
Yeah, and I think Sauron also brings up, power over people. Of course, that's his whole thing.
Yes.
But Celebrimbor kind of points out later, and we'll talk about this, but power over something opens you up to being overpowered by it, right? It opens up that competition. Power of something, like the elves with their rings bringing balance to things, that does not invite overpowering.
Right.
Interesting.
You can't flip the power dynamic if you don't have one.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is, it feels like there's some Earthsea related concept, that Ursula K. Le Guin was using a little bit of that as well. Huh. Not in a direct one-on-one sense, but just in a sense, a philosophical sense of, if you're pushing hard on the wind and using all this stuff, it's going to change the system. And if if you're not, maybe that's a slightly different argument. It's just I'm trying to, I see what you're saying, and I'm just trying to feel it out, John, a little bit more.
It's all right. Go find your goats and come back to me.
I think one thing could be is when Get says that at the end of the day, the most skilled act of magic is to do only what you must do.
Yeah.
And often that means not doing anything.
Right.
So it's a very different approach.
This is, we don't have much ring lore around the dwarves. It's like they've got them.
Nope. Yep.
No, it says is it enhances their greed.
Yep.
Right.
And
their gold lust, right?
The gold lust. Yep. That's about all. But they also say that each of the 7 hordes had as its basis a ring.
Right.
So there is that sense of, that they used it to gain wealth and so forth. But, overstepping, as we saw a couple of times, he never used to, greed was never his way. So that, I think, was a nice, solid.
I think it's a nice fleshing out of the dwarven ring lore.
And yet him saying to him, you're going to need a ring in order to, understand the mountain the way I have.
Right.
Was a little worry making.
Yes, indeed. Yep. Indeed. Yeah, we have some questions there. This was also, we got another kiss here. We had a Disa and Durin kiss. I think a lot of people will be happy with that. I didn't think, there was some discussion about the Elrond Galadriel kiss, but it was more people bracing for the impact than the actual impact. I didn't think it was that crazy making.
Yeah, people didn't seem to have a visceral reaction, which I think actually shows a mature audience that they were able to see the nuance in it.
Yeah. I really don't get why so many people were clutching their pearls and setting their
I think we were worried for the crazy trolls on the internet to overreact.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
So shall we move on to a scene that I call an old friend? And before we start the scene, I want to highlight that I think there was another theme throughout this episode, which was false friends. People waving the friendship flag.
Nice.
When they are not your friend. And this is the first scene that appears, and there's more, and I'll point them out as we go through. The stranger arrives at Store Central to find the Dark Wizard. Bronk holds the Harfoots at knife point, and the Dark Wizard pretends to be a good guy and saves Poppy and Nori from the raiders. The Dark Wizard tries to convince the stranger to defeat Sauron with him and become his successor, but the stranger declines. The Dark Wizard causes a landslide that destroys the store home, but the stranger uses his magic to stop the rocks from killing the stores.
This between the Dark Wizard and Sauron, it's pretty toxic gas situation here in Middle Earth. These guys are gaslighting the hell out of everyone around them. That was wild.
And he keeps saying, "My old friend, my old friend."
Walk with
as soon
me.
as I
Every
heard
like
that,
3
I
seconds.
was just, oh dearie me.
All right, I want everyone to place your bet. Who is it?
Well, it's Sauron, of course.
You think it is Saruman?
Of course it is.
I will hate if it's Saruman.
I'm already hating it.
Because Gandalf, if this is Saruman and Gandalf gets duped in the Third Age on the ring stuff,
yeah.
then Gandalf's stupid. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think that fits his character. So if this is Saruman, I will be very upset. I will genuinely be very upset with the show. And I'm not, and you guys know I am very kind on letting the lore slide with these guys.
Sure.
Right.
Letting
Sure.
things,
Sure.
as long as it's trivia, that's fine. This will fundamentally change characterizations in the future. And I don't like that. So let's just hope that it's not.
I don't think they're going to, because this is already showing that he tried to dupe him and he failed. So
It would be weird. Would it be really weird? Yeah.
Bizarre. Unless you're
Yeah.
saying that they both got mind wiped.
Yeah.
And
Who
then that
knows?
is like, come on.
Who knows?
He does say there were 5 of us, right? So we have Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, and then the 2 blues.
Yep.
That's canon.
So they're keeping the blues alive in a sense, but I think my greater disappointment, and I think this goes back, and I'm still resolving my feelings about 8, yeah, because there's like we said, there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of whatever stuff, but I think this would be, I would have been excited if they had stuck with the blues, if these were just 2 blues. That would have been their own story.
Of course.
And they would have been making a nice big swing and, making a stand. But I think it goes back to the Jackson thing where like, well, we're going to just keep playing with, I get it. You've got to lay track for the casual fans, but damn it, man. Also, swing out a little bit, right? Take a risk.
Well, I think you also have a rights issue here. You have
good
nothing
point.
on the Blue Wizards. You have the fact that there are 5 wizards.
That's a really
so you
good
have
point.
the absolute.
I wasn't thinking about that at all.
You have a vacuum of information there, so they wouldn't have been able to call them Blue Wizards. I'm pretty sure. They would not have been able to give them the names from the extended lore, which I think there are 2 sets of them actually. So
there are. Yeah.
So, but anyway, they wouldn't have been able to pull anything. So I'm okay.
I feel okay. Okay.
I don't think that it's necessarily obvious for them to do the Blue Wizards because of that. I would have liked it, but I don't blame them on that. I will really hate if it's Saruman. Now, it could be Radagast because Radagast, Sylvester McCoy played Radagast in the movie and he was the 7th Doctor, so he can regenerate.
No, I'm sorry.
You're getting some Doctor Who.
I don't care how eternal he is. No, see,
I just wanted to make a Doctor Who joke.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, check off that box. I just think it would have been less likely for them to be sued if they're going into unwritten territory at this point.
They wouldn't even have to call them blues. They could have just made up 2 wizards out in the West.
Yeah, and they didn't have to call them, the names that we know, and they could have been so creative.
Yeah, yeah.
And given us so many interesting ideas about this.
I am a kind elf. Kind elf.
I really don't understand why they're doing it. Because if you are a Jackson fan, you don't need these sort of teases and hints and whatever. You know already. If you know nothing about it whatsoever, all of these teases and hints are going to be utterly meaningless, and you're just going to say, "Why do they keep calling it Grand Elf? What's that supposed to be?" I don't understand who they think they're targeting with this.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying before. Too much salt. They just over-seasoned here with this.
These cowards didn't want to do a nude Sir Ian McKellen crashing into the Earth with a meteor.
Well, I'm sorry.
Cowards.
I'm not too unhappy about that.
Cowards.
They did it carefully and tastefully, and that was fine.
And it was a very Sauron-y, Gandalf-y style conflict in some ways.
It's literally just a rehash of
It is.
Yeah.
Join me against Sauron.
Yeah.
No. Okay, then you'll suffer.
Yeah.
And a couple thousand years from now, we'll do this all over again. No.
I will not enjoy that. If that is Saruman, I will legitimately remember the Ahsoka finale? You ain't seen nothing.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. I better get my asbestos screen on my computer.
Exactly. And then they threw in the pity line. And I was like,
No, I loved that line.
I loved that line. But it was like they were just layering it on everything so thick, right? So
I want to talk about the pity line because let's talk about what we did like about the scene.
Okay.
I love the pity line because pity will not defeat Sauron is so cocky and it's so antithetical to what becomes the point later, right? Which is that pity stayed Bilbo's hand, then later stayed Frodo's hand and allowed Gollum to live long enough to help destroy the One Ring.
Pity opens the way for Eru and for Eucatastrophe.
Right. And so I actually really like that because it is really on point. I get that. It also, Tolkien is very on point sometimes. Like sometimes he just wants to state a moral and that's fine. And also it's something that I could see a villain saying in that situation, right? I feel like like they led us there pretty naturally, right? Like with Nori being like, yeah, I do pity the people who had a knife to my throat. And him saying pity will not defeat Sauron, like basically like dismissing it as a weak emotion when that is the emotion that will take Sauron by surprise and lead to his demise in The Lord of the Rings.
And it connects nicely with what we see at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
I suppose the reaction to the line versus what the meaning behind the line is, because it's also kind of it serves as a litmus test for them to figure out that the Dark Wizard is the Dark Wizard and not, that he's gaslighting them. Right? He's like, oh, you don't even, the way that he says, you pity that guy? And you're like, ooh, you've got a bad attitude. Like if you actually had an open heart and had pity, you would, you might talk it through a little bit differently in a little different way. But he was just like, oh, these former kings are trash.
Well, frankly, we saw a couple of episodes ago that here's a person who is willing to slice the palms of one of his acolytes to bring somebody. I mean, blood magic is a pretty big flashing sign, right? There. Yeah. So I wasn't in front of the really going to expect anything.
Yeah, but in front of the Stoors and the way
the Stoors already knew he was a bad wizard. We don't know how, but I mean, they were so afraid of him that when Nori and Poppy said, "Oh yeah, we've been traveling with this wizard dude," it's like, wizard man, we're injecting you in the morning. Fortunately, that didn't take place.
Yeah, so I want to talk too about what's his name? I wrote it in there.
Kieran Hines.
No, I want to talk about Bronk.
Okay.
Because I don't think we've seen the last of him. He had.
I think you're right, John. I think you're right.
He had this line. My people were once kings.
Right.
I have that line too. Yep.
I think we have not seen the last of him, and
he's dead though because he hit his head on the back of the thing, and then his henchman ran away.
He could just be knocked out.
No, they showed blood on the stick.
And there could
Does all blood kill you? I don't buy it. I don't buy it. David Bronk is alive. I'm not moving him to deceased in the show guide.
And even if he isn't. He said, my people were kings in the plural, so he's not the only one.
He's not alone, yeah.
And there may be some future ring material there amongst those particular kings.
Let's keep our secrets here. I didn't load it up then.
You didn't? I didn't. Yeah, I didn't do that for you. You got to put it in the new clip library, John.
I know. I do. I'm on my backup computer right now because my wife got into a video game where you build a little town, and so she's on my gaming PC that I usually record on.
Fair enough.
Priorities.
Hold on, here we go.
Secrets.
There it is.
We got it.
Kieran Hines was having fun with this role. His crazy eyes. He was
sure.
Oh, hey, my friend. It was.
No, he was doing it great.
Yeah.
But, just sorry that they had to do all the Saruman cues.
Clearly, and then the way they left it, right, were big hooks for season 3. So we see the constellation in the night sky.
Yes.
Wasn't there somebody in the Tolkien academic world who studies the astrology of the Middle Earth and like maps out all the stars and stuff like that?
Yeah. That's Christine Anderson.
That's amazing.
If I get the name right.
How do you to pull all that material out of Tolkien's writing and then actually do constellation work? Not only did he do that, but then that we can drive it out and actually do some work on it. It's wild.
She does some wonderful stuff. Look her up online and see, find some of her things.
Well,
speaking of which, I meant to say this a couple of episodes ago. I noticed that in the opening scene with the vibrating dust pieces, the constellation, the Hermit's Hat, appears on either side of
nice. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Next time you look at it, take a look and see. Great.
Good pick.
Very nice.
Of course, last Star Wars comment, I couldn't help but think about Yoda and Dagobah, with, the rocks, and it's too heavy, I can't lift it. And, it's like, no, size doesn't matter. Anyway, enough Star Wars.
All right.
I've got one more, though, for this episode.
Okay, fair enough. Well, before we go to break, I want to tell everyone we are doing a live event coming up. So here's where we're going to promote it. David, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing? And I'll gonna go find the link while you do that.
You know what? I swear to God, I don't know enough to be able to speak to it.
Right.
So I can talk about it.
Okay, we'll have Marilyn do it.
Pitch Marilyn.
Yeah. So this is.
Wait, let me pitch it. Let me pitch it quick. Marilyn, you want to tell the folks at home what we're doing on this live event?
Yes, Aaron of Lore of the Rings has invited several podcasters who are podcasting about Tolkien to come together in a live event to talk about the series and to have people live call in or type in or whatever method you want to use to access us. So the three of us are going to be there. And then there's
Danae from
Captain's Pod.
Yep.
And of course, Aaron himself. And it's going to be interesting. Haven't done one of these before, so it'll be...
Me either. Aaron's got this whole setup on... it's called Crowdcast, so it's a platform specifically for live podcasting. It looks really cool. I think the three of us are really excited to do it. It's $3 to attend. I think we mostly did that out of a desire to keep out trolls who just want to hate on the show.
Right.
And the proceeds, a portion of them will be donated to charity involving orphans, I think we're going to do. So I don't want to promise that, but probably involving orphans, since Tolkien and his way for both orphans.
Right.
You can find that all at ringspodcast.com/live. I'll put that in the show notes as well. All right, let's take our quick break.
Nicole, did you ever notice how the sign by Ace of Base has really strange key changes?
I did not, Mark. I'm a real person.
Well, let me tell you about it. I'll let you talk about neuroscience gobbledygook.
Yes, I thought you'd never ask.
This is the Nevermind the Music podcast,
where one psychologist
and one musician
deep dive into the songs you love.
So you don't have to.
And there's plenty of time to get off topic.
From Semi-Charmed Life to The Way You Move.
And who could forget The Crossroads?
Is it The Crossroads or The Crossroads?
Save it for the episode, Mark.
Listen to Nevermind the Music
wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. All right, let's move on to the faithful fleeing. Eregion. I can never say that name right. Eregion.
It was perfect.
Eregion.
You did it. That was right.
Eregion
right. Yes.
Exactly
gathers the faithful for Pharazôn, who gives them, quote, evidence that Miriel is allied with Sauron. The faithful are declared traitors and arrested. Eregion sneaks away and warns Elendil, who finds Miriel and attempts to convince her to flee as the white tree of Numenor sheds leaves. Petals, I should say.
Yes.
The queen tells Elendil to leave without her and gives him Narsil before he leaves for the west and his son Anarion.
Beautiful shot of the tree opening this up, the way it was lit up and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
For a minute, I thought it was the tree in Lindon, and then I said, "Oh no, okay,
yeah,
not with that dome behind it or whatever."
And then with the petals falling, we had petals falling in season 1, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So
at a very critical moment.
Right.
The tree, my whole line in the Second Age podcast was follow the trees.
Follow the trees.
Because the trees signify sort of oneness with Eru, oneness with the Valar, being in sync with the will of the Holy Ones. Mm-hmm. And so each time the white tree starts shedding, that's supposed to be a sign that these people are straying from the path. Right. And so gathering up all the faithful to imprison them, I think, is straying from the path a bit, wouldn't you say?
I think that ticks that box, yes.
Now, can I just complain about this? Like,
Get in line, John.
What is the evidence? What is the evidence that they, like a manila envelope, like go slide a manila envelope across the table and be like, she's allied with Sauron? Like, what was that evidence? I don't understand.
They didn't explain it.
Yeah. I was tying it back to when Farazan was looking in the Palantir and he sees a vision of Halbrand. Mm-hmm. Who then, it's like he looks around his shoulder and looks back, and then there's an image of him in the Palantir looking straight on, and then the energy goes all blue and jagged the way it usually does. I have no idea what that means. I don't know if it means anything in particular, but that was the only thing I could think of that would lead Farazan to put this idea forward, mm-hmm. whether or not it's true.
But so I'm with you on how Farazan knows. I'm with you on that.
Well, but I don't know if it is actually even works, because when did he ever find out that Halbrand is Sauron?
Well, I think the only way you can do that is by saying he learned it from the Palantir, right? Like that would those were sort of snapshots of what he was seeing, but he understood what they meant. Sure, I'm on board with that. That's fine.
All right.
But what are you sliding over to the faithful to be like, this is Sauron?
Yeah.
Like they don't have cameras, guys. You can't just like slide over a picture of Halbrand and be like, here's a picture of Halbrand. Here's a picture of Sauron. They're the same picture.
And where's the picture of Halbrand with Miriel?
Right.
So is this a season 3 setup?
Later in the episode is a season 3 setup.
Because
this is too, but
they wrap it up with her in manacles and sort of, at trial. But is this, they didn't do. Did it get cut, or did they leave it intentionally a little bit loose so that they can work on it a little bit more in season 3?
All right, then.
That's my question.
I think they realized that they had a lot of ground to cover in a very short amount of time, and so this all feels kind of rushed.
But you have 3 more seasons. You have 3 more seasons. I think where we left off is fine. I think where we left off is perfectly fine. Numenor in disarray.
Yeah.
Elendil going to his son in Arion. We're going to get a little family reunion. I think great. I think that's a perfectly fine. And Miriel in custody, Farazan in charge. We're in a good spot for Numenor in this part of the plotline. I think they have plenty of time to get done what they need to get done.
I mean, I think Farazan was really rattled by the outcome of the sea monster trial kind of thing. And so he felt, okay, I got to come up with something fast. And I don't know that he even cared if anybody really believed it or not.
Well, something that I think they're nailing is that Farazan in the books was really ruled by fear.
Oh, yeah.
And here we have that.
We're seeing that more.
He lashes out when he's more fearful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because he's very calm, cool, collected in season 1 when everything's all happy-go-lucky, right?
Right.
And the minute he feels threatened in his power is when he goes berserk.
And we've seen him lashing out at Kemen, his son, and even the scenes of him, he's a little bit more wild-eyed. His hair's a little bit more unkempt. He's a little bit more, a little bit crazier. So yeah, that's cool. I like that. I
love that later in the episode too, he's like, get my son to another continent, please. Go away.
But even that scene from last episode, I believe it was, immediately after he was handed the scepter and declared ruler of Numenor. And Kemen is standing beside him saying, Dad, what's wrong? You've got the scepter. You've got all the power there is. Why are you looking off in the distance and looking at this elf tower? Mm-hmm. You can do whatever you want with Numenor now. So
if Sauron is on the other end of the, is on the network, as it were, of the Palantiri network, And there are actual companies called Palantir. There's a company called Palantir
I know.
out there. Yeah.
I know.
That
yeah.
feels like a trademark infringement.
Kind
It-
of.
Kind of is.
But that if Sauron's on the network there, what does Sauron do? He feeds you what you need. Like, you know, what is it that is front and center for you?
He satisfies.
And so
Yeah.
if Pharazôn has this, like, oh, you know, like we need control, because if we don't have control, then the bad things are going to get us or whatever. Like, if he's being driven by fear, if his need for control is driven by fear, what better thing for Sauron to do is to feed that energy, stoke those fires of his fear through the Palantir.
I'd feel a lot better about it all if I had ever seen any evidence that, you know, Sauron, Halbrand, or Annatar had ever had a Palantir in their hands.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's pretend there's one in Eregion. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
I guess nobody told Celebrimbor about it.
Yeah. It's in the attic, right? Like everybody forgot.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah, in the attic.
Dusty attic.
I
guys
am
see-
headcanoning this thing to oblivion.
Yeah. Did you guys see a couple of things about Eregion? She was wearing blue again, right? Which is because they were doing the whole red thing, and then she switched back to blue. But then this is just a little detail thing. The bells. She was playing the bells by pulling levers, which I thought was really interesting, as opposed to pulling on chords. And I tried to do some quick internet searching, but I didn't come up with anything. But I loved that tactile sort of lever thing. I don't know. That was cool. I'd never seen that before.
As a sometime bell ringer,
I say part-time bell ring.
explain to you. Well,
Yes, please.
I've done it for years. My interpretation of that is they're not intended to ring singly. So you can put two on a strut and then, you know, just sort of mechanically have them go back and forth by pulling the levers up and down. The bells that I think you're thinking of are the ones, the single bell on a rope, and you have more control over when it rings and when it doesn't. And
Right.
you have a Sally on the rope, which tells you how high up it goes and all kinds of stuff I can't begin to explain. Go ahead and read The Nine Tailors by Dorothy L. Sayers. There's a lot in there about bell ringing.
So which one is responsible for the Liberty Bell? Like, can we get to the bottom of that?
Which Liberty Bell are we talking about here? Part of the United States? Or?
Yeah. I'm the crack in it, you know? How did that happen?
Oh, I see.
How'd that happen?
Poor smithing, probably.
Oh, hey, that's a topic for your project, John.
You got to keep the lid on it. It's for subscribers only on this discussion for now.
Not
Well,
ready to-
maybe
I got something
it's an
cooking for the off
enticement.
season.
It's an enticement
Yeah,
for people to
stay
say.
tuned on the off season.
Yeah.
Did the posting of the decrees give you a little bit of reference? Sorry about that. Did the posting of the decrees give you a kind of a reformationary kind of thing? Didn't what's his name? Bang
Martin Luther.
Martin
Thank you.
Luther.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bang
99 pieces in the
as
wall.
notice on the door. I don't know. I've kind of felt like
Felt more persecution like than that.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
I
no,
think
me too.
yeah, the
Felt
more
opposite of it.
fascist than it.
Yeah.
Yeah, more because Martin Luther, he's nailing
Traitors of
something
Westernness.
he's nailing something to the
Liberate.
door of authority.
Right.
Right. Whereas
He's taking. You know, I'm doing the most charitable read of Martin Luther possible here.
Yes,
but
yes.
you're doing a very good job.
but you know, he's trying to speak truth to power. Right. This is speaking lies to the public.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And trying to scare the heck out of everybody.
Yeah.
So it's very authoritarian. I was interested to see the little glance that Pharazôn gave to it, Eregion, as she slipped out of the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm afraid there may be trouble brewing there.
And the absence of Kemen is noticeable in retrospect. I didn't notice it at the time, but now it's like,
Sure.
oh yeah,
Because he was on the ship.
So
Exactly.
he pulls Eregion into this thing, and she's like at odds with her dad. She has very few friends, and then he just nopes out to Pelargir and doesn't even take her.
Yeah.
Maybe by this time she's just said, no thanks, I'm not going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I got to stay here for my dad.
Yeah.
You know, all right. Now I'm going to complain again. Narsil. This was a
I'm right
horrendous
there.
reveal, and I wish Elendil just
Really?
had Narsil. Yeah, I wish he just had
It
Narsil
was
already.
awful.
Why did she have Narsil? What's the lore behind it? It just felt like it popped out. It looked like they ordered it from the Peter Jackson lore catalog, and it just arrived, and they just handed it to Elendil in a weird ceremonious fashion. To me, it should have been that Narsil earns its legacy by Elendil's deeds, not by Muriel being like, this is a legendary sword. We call it Narsil. And I think back to our good friend Aaron from Lord of the Rings. He was saying on a recent podcast, the show is doing a lot of telling instead of showing. And I do agree with him on this. On some of the things in this episode were very, very tell, not show.
And the way he took it, the way he looked at it, the way he grasped it, it was a repeat of everything that Eregion did when, in the movies, Elrond brought the reforged Narsil to him.
Right.
And I just thought, guys, why?
Well,
it just spoiled it for me because Narsil has its own history. I wanted to see Elendil's reaction.
We want to see
he's not Aragorn, even if he is his ancestor. Let him be Elendil.
Right. Let's watch the history of Narsil be written rather than have it be told to us.
Or have it just be a prelude for another sword.
It's been in the background of a couple of shots in this season and last season, and we've all been like, "Oh, is that Narsil?
Is that Narsil? You're right.
Just let it be there, right? They don't know this word. I think it's pronounced subtile. Like they don't know that word in the writer's room.
What's the word?
Subtle.
Subtile.
Oh, so like, what? That was too soup delay for me.
There you go.
What is there lore? Like you don't have to be specific, but is there written lore about Narsil prior to Aragorn and the shatter, and the shattering of it, and then Aragorn and the reforging of it? Is there second age, first age history on Narsil?
It was Elendil's sword.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything before this.
It was Elendil who made it famous.
We're trying to watch this happen, right? Like this is exactly like you said, Marilyn. Like we are trying to watch history happen rather than let that play out. Don't be like, this already has a deep history.
All right, so we're going to play writer's room here for a second. She has a ceremony to promote, to do something nice for Elendil or whatever, and she bequeaths, hey, this is the finest craftsmen of our land have made this sword, and I honor you with it. I shall call it what is it, the White Flame? Is that the name of I shall call it the White Flame, Narsil, and then ta-da! But instead it was some sort of artifact that was kept in the tower next to the Palantir and everything else.
Well, it was also, she says, with this sword, claim your destiny.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little on the
He has
nose.
to make his destiny.
Right. Okay.
Now, I didn't mind the claim your lordship piece because that, that's fine. According to this version, he had rejected his lordship. He didn't want to be associated with the West because that was dangerous. His son Anarion had gone off that way, and I'm glad we get a name check on him again.
Right.
And now she's saying, no, you are a lord of Andunier, although she doesn't actually say that. Probably they don't have rights to it. But, reaffirming that, yes, he is also descended from Elros and of the royal line. And here is a wonderful sword for you to take and to re-enter that part of your life.
Yeah.
And it is what he subsequently does with that sword that makes it so special.
She's like, I'm a queen. I got swords. You're a wannabe lord. Let's do the deal. Let's do the deal here.
I'm making a note in my wrap-up notes here that this is a compressed season issue.
I agree with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And when we see this all over the place in modern TV, I'll save this for later, but was 8 the right number? For the amount of content that they were trying to cover? And I'm going to assert that 8 was not enough.
Though, of course, given the restrictions that they had, they were not allowed more than 8 per season.
There you go.
That was part of the
original deal.
I've yet to see a show with 8 episodes that felt like it was enough.
Right.
As far as like prestige, big budget TV.
Sure,
I think you can say like a comedy show can do 8 episodes and it's probably fine.
I've seen some British murder mysteries where it's like 5 or 6 and then
mini series. There are things that work with 8 episodes, but I don't think a story like this can work with 8 episodes. It needs to breathe.
Well, all I have to say about all of this is these are not the faithful you are looking for.
Is that your last one?
Yeah, that was my last one. And I did not pull the quote. I was going to go, I got a little busy this afternoon, but I was going to try to pull Ben Kenobi.
Were you just gonna like overdub you going, these are not the faithful you were looking for?
That would have been funny. That would have been good.
All right, let's go to the destruction of Eregion. It's a short scene. The orcs invade Eregion and destroy much of its population, while Galadriel leads a group of survivors out. They are surrounded by orcs, but Galadriel surrenders herself with the 9 rings in exchange for the escape of the others.
Something we didn't mention last week, but I saw somebody else mention, or heard somebody else mention, and then I saw something again in this one that reminded me was on the attack, they were waiting until there was enough smoke in the sky to dull the light for the orcs to be able to charge out. And we kind of see that again in this episode. So I just wanted to point that out, that was a good piece of attention to detail in the cinematography or in the storyline.
They've also really exaggerated the effects of sunlight on orcs in this show. Like this is not.
They sure have.
They're not like burning. They're not vampires, right? Like they can go in the sun. They just don't like it.
Right. And I think with enough cloudy, smoky haze like this, it works to that advantage.
Yeah.
And then like a little bit of a covering. So
I also wanted to say that this scene is, to my mind, a nice callback to Idril, who actually built the escape tunnel in Gondolin.
Oh.
And when Gondolin was attacked and overwhelmed, she was able to lead people through this tunnel and out to escape. And was confronted by some of the enemy anyway.
Which sets up an interesting trolley problem for Galadriel there. 9 rings versus how many elf civilians? The fate of the entire world versus, she could have fought her way out of that herself. But, she would not have been able to rescue everyone. But instead, she chooses to give up the 9 instead of.
Well, but I don't know. I think she's desperate there, but I also think she sort of had a plan of like, all right, I'm not even going to show him exactly what the 9 can do, but let's go get my ring back. Once I get there, I can try to talk my way out of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it was as straightforward as we're looking at, but I think once she saw Adar, which we'll get to later, in his elvish form, I think her heart changed a bit.
And I think you're actually pointing to something that I didn't think about before, which is she is by turning herself in, she is expecting that the Uruk is going to act in accordance with the rules and have honor.
Because Adar has honor and is acting within a set of values and principles and rules and what have you. Which is what we kind of talked about with like an orc is a mentality, not just a race, not specifically a race. And so she's saying, white flag, surrender, take me to your leader, and because he had made a previous promise. So maybe it's less of a trolley problem in that regard because she doesn't know that Sauron's going to pop up in 5 minutes later. Yeah, well, neither does Adar.
No, right. Clearly.
But that is an interesting point, David, that these are still orcs with which you can make deals and bargains. I hadn't thought about that. So
this is a fake one-er shot. A one-er shot is where there's no cuts in the scene. The camera is filming the scene from one end to the other. So but it's a fake one though. But it's really nicely done, given it's not a true one-er. But there's 2 big one-er chunks in there. The first flaming shot comes, streaking towards the camera, and then the orcs come over the wall. So right there, the camera picks them up. It follows them to some more orcs coming in the door, and then the camera backs up, and then it shows an orc archer shooting an arrow up at a guy up on the wall. That's where I think the first cut happens, because then the second one-er is following the 2 archers up on the parapet, whatever thing running around there, and then one guy runs back, slides down the roof and lands. So at the point where he jumps over, I think is where they do another digital cut. And then it's a oneer again until Galadriel appears, escorting the women and children out until they get to the final end of their sequence, where we get some more like flaming shot come flying in. So it was really, I think, two real oneers that are then digitally stitched at one moment, but they're stitched in a way that it actually, even from the beginning to the end, the all of the sequence, it makes it look all seamlessly one. So
nice.
Yeah. It was interesting.
That's very cool.
Yep.
David, I'm going to assign you homework, which is you got to watch the actual oneer episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie Day leads you through a health inspection where everybody's getting into nonsense, and it really is all one shot. It's
Goodness
very
gracious.
cool stuff. It's like a 25-minute episode with that.
I'm putting it into the searches now to see if I can track it down.
It's on Hulu, I think, if you have Hulu.
Okay. Is it season 1?
No, it's late.
Okay.
I'll find it for you later.
Okay.
So let's get back to Rings of Power. So let's go deeper into Eregion for Goodbye, Celebrimbor. Sauron tortures Celebrimbor by firing arrows into him at non-lethal points and bending the arrows to cause more pain. He tells him he will continue to torture him as those in Gondolin were tortured during its fall, unless Celebrimbor tells him where the 9 rings are. Celebrimbor taunts Sauron, telling him that he is the prisoner of the rings and that one ring will destroy him. Sauron takes the bait and kills Celebrimbor before the orcs come in to change allegiances.
It's your fault that I'm shooting you with these arrows.
Look what you made me do. When he said that, I was like, all right, a little on the nose on the abusive comparison.
He's been doing it all along.
That was wild.
Can we cue the Taylor Swift? Your daughter likes Taylor Swift, right, David?
Yeah.
Look what you made me do. Look.
The workshop in ruins was pretty, some nice shots in there. It was very dramatic. And pretty brutal, though, like what Sauron is doing with the arrows, like bending them and stuff. Like, man, that guy.
They raised the rating 2 years this season.
Yeah.
You know
did they?
That's what I heard.
Okay,
it was TV. I think it was TV 16 last season, and it's TV 18 this season.
Mm-hmm.
Though there was one episode that was TV 14 rated. So
really?
They seem to be going up and down depending on what happened.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we know why they rated the whole season as a whole to be 18, because probably this scene.
Yeah.
Well, I will confess, no, I didn't watch it.
That's all right.
I skimmed through both times. I'm relying on you guys to.
Did you get
fill me
any
in
of the
on all the
audio
good lines
though
and
for the
Oh
quote?
gosh, no.
Okay, so
But
there's
you got them, so I figured I was fine.
there's a line, Marilyn. I'm going to read it to you now.
Couple of lines.
There's some good lines and some lines that make me go a little on the nose. I think this one has a little bit of both in it.
Interesting.
Celebrimbor says these are he goes, "Hear the last words of Lord Celebrimbor."
What? He says that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Says something like that.
Oh, dear.
And he says, "The rings of power shall destroy you, and in the end, I foresee, one alone shall prove your utter ruin."
No, he's not wrong there.
Well, then what's the next? Is it the next line, or is it a little bit later? And he calls Sauron Lord of the Rings.
He does call Sauron Lord of the Rings. He tells him you're a prisoner of the rings, and he's like, Sauron Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, hey, that's the name of the movie.
Yes, that's the thing.
Well, they'd already used that word. Actually, Anatar said that Celebrimbor was the Lord of the Rings. And I think Celebrimbor, from what you're saying, it sounds like
that makes sense.
he decided to shove it back on his face and say, no, not me.
There you go.
This is your mess.
That makes sense.
Marilyn, now that I know that you didn't watch it, now I can tell you that you brought up Idril from Gondolin in another scene. Gondolin is explicitly name dropped here.
Right.
Sauron.
I saw you mention it in the list ahead of time, so I thought, oh, there we go.
Yeah. So Gondolin, let's go into this quick. Gondolin was a city in the First Age. It was the greatest city of elves. It was supposed to be the closest thing to Tirion, which is elf capital in Valinor, right? In Ammon, I should say. And it's supposed to be this wonderful, wonderful place, hidden. Nobody goes in, nobody goes out. It's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, right? And it falls at the end of the First Age, but there's this whole thing where Ulmo, one of the Valar, says, listen, don't get too attached. Your city will eventually fall, but I'm going to make sure 2 things. One, your city is the last city that will fall in Elvish kingdoms in Beleriand. Second is that I will send a messenger. to tell you, when it's coming, so that as many of your people can escape as possible. So Sauron here says, in Gondolin, he says, I could do this for days. In Gondolin, it said that it went on and on and on, the torturing and whatnot. So pretty brutal. And we're going to cover that on Silmarillion stories eventually. It's one of the last stories in the Silmarillion. You're going to do the story, I think it's the one just before that, right? You're doing Turin Turambar.
Turin Turambar.
And then is it next chapter after that is Tuor?
I can't remember.
All right. Well, anyway, it's similar to there. It's towards the end of the Silmarillion.
Sure.
And brutal tale. And Tolkien, Christopher actually, eventually, Tolkien's son, compiled all the writings about Gondolin and made it into novel form with The Fall of Gondolin, which is one of the 3 great tales he published posthumously.
Well, one of the key themes in that whole exchange, Ulmos tells Turgon before he leaves the coast, love not too well the work of your own hands and the devices of your heart. And the true hope of the Valar, the true hope of the Noldor lies across the sea.
One of the other lines in this was that I was like, oh boy, they're really salting here, is where he says, the rings are beyond your reach, which wasn't that a Frodo line, or a line that they said, that, oh, Frodo's beyond your reach now, or beyond our reach now. So it was, again, just more of that sort of peppering in stuff.
Well, that's maybe a little bit of a reach.
Yeah. No.
In and of itself.
Yeah,
I think Gandalf says something about Frodo is beyond my sight now.
Oh, maybe
he
that's
used
what it
the
was.
word reach.
Okay. No, I thought there was a reach line there.
I think it's still a little different too because of the posturing of the people, right? Like you have Elrond who is worried about him, and then you have Sauron, Celebrimbor who's saying like, you can't catch them now. Like you're never going to find them. I think that's a little different. But I did really enjoy that Celebrimbor, back in his senses, was able to bait Sauron into killing him before getting the location of the rings.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Absolutely.
Right. And there was another really good line. I didn't write it down, but it was, Sauron calls himself a craftsman, and he goes, craftsman, the only thing you craft is, what was it, David?
I have it. I've got it here in my notes. Your only craft is treachery. That's it. Your only craft is treachery.
Well, there's more though.
I didn't write the rest of it.
Your only craft is treachery, so pure it can deceive its own maker, or something like that. It was really tasty.
Nice.
Celebrimbor had some really good lines in here, I thought.
He did.
I'm glad, because he certainly deserves them.
If you could stomach closing your eyes and listening to the audio, I'd recommend you listen to Charles Edwards' performance.
Well, I might do that sometime. We'll see. Or just at the very least, read a script. I'm sure it'll be out there.
I don't think there's a lot of audio violence. I think it's mostly visual.
So we don't get moans and groans?
I think he just goes like a couple times, right? Because he's trying to be strong. He's trying not to look like he's suffering under Sauron.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad they allowed him to recover his dignity and his lordship, and even some farsightedness. Yeah. I'm reminded now of how his grandfather Fëanor died, that he looked upon the strong hold of Angband and realized that the Noldor were never going to succeed. And with the eyes of death, he foresaw all that was going to happen. Yet he still had his sons swear the oath one more time to their dying father. Yeah. So that is really the point at which Fëanor deserved being in Mandos for the rest of his pay.
Yeah, he's in timeout forever.
Yeah,
but also I like that his grandson here dies
in a different way,
in a much different way, right? He's setting the Noldor free of this burden and allowing Sauron to have full responsibility for the rings.
And it also comes back to the thing that I keep saying over and over, and people are probably tired of hearing me say, is what is it that Celebrimbor has that Sauron doesn't? And I'm getting a sort of a hint here from what you were saying, that at the end of the day, he isn't a really fine crafter.
Right.
He is not as good as Celebrimbor.
Right. He doesn't have the patience. He doesn't have he doesn't have the will to sacrifice himself. Right.
Well, and his focus is different. His focus is illusion and manipulation rather than genuine crafting. So it's an interesting interpretation, because initially it was, in fact, An-Natar who was teaching things to the elven smiths that they hadn't known before, but his knowledge only went so far, and Celebrimbor's exceeded that, and that was why he needed him.
So it's not like Anatar shows up. He goes to the Eregion donut shop. He says, "You ever thought of making those in gold?"
Probably
Mythra?
not. Probably not.
All right.
For one thing, I don't think they had donuts yet.
2 last thoughts. One, Charles Edwards, thank you for your service, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's the last we're going to have of him. So,
Well, he gets
Incredible
a little moment for a second later in the episode.
well, but overall, his
Yeah,
arc
yeah,
is done here, and I think
He's
it's
done.
what a really great performance. I have enjoyed him on screen pretty much the whole time, and I thought he did a great job.
He grew
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
between the first sighting of him in season 1.
Yeah.
to-
I think you can tell that he and Charlie Vickers were having fun together.
I think
as
so.
much as they were adversaries, I think they had a
Oh,
lot of fun acting those
Gosh,
scenes
I
together.
hope they did.
Yeah.
I hope they did because they needed some kind of emotional relief from.
Yeah, for the intensity of the relationship.
I'd watch I hope someone puts together like a sitcom edit, right? Like Anatar and Celebrimbor trying to make the rings, and
Bosom
Celebrimbor
buddies.
gets distracted by his mouse. It's kind of like I told David and Alicia about Kevin Can F Himself, the show
Yeah.
where it's like changes perspective, and one day it's a sitcom, then somebody leaves the room and it becomes a drama. And I'm like, what if we shot this in multi-camera? And we were really
there are people who do these edits though. There's have you seen the one of Andor? If it was like a 70s sort of like Airwolf or A-Team kind of thing, it's sort of
Dear.
slightly funny. They're brilliant. They recuts like that. So yeah, well, I think we could definitely order one of those up from the.
All right. You heard
Last
it here,
note.
folks.
What does Sauron call Glug when he comes in? He calls him Uruk.
Yeah.
not Orc.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
He takes. Oh yeah, you missed that, Marilyn. It's I'm trying to determine where you came back in, but
I didn't come back in until after we no longer saw Anatar.
Yeah.
Because after this is Pelennor, right?
See.
So
yeah. So
Right.
or Pelagier.
Pelargir.
Sorry,
Pelargir,
Pelennor.
yeah.
Right.
No, I see where you're going with that. At Lord of the Rings, I get it.
Yeah.
But so Anatar, sorry, Marilyn, but he kills brutally Celebrimbor. He shoves him up the wall on a spike, and then Glug,
Glug.
Gloogie,
Glug.
Glug.
Yeah,
which
it's an
is-
umlaut.
Yeah.
Glug.
It's not an umlaut. It's the other one. It's the little tent.
Yeah, but it's also the name for a delightful Swedish
Drink.
drink that it happens around Yule.
Well, anyway, so Glug, he comes in and he's like, "Hey, Sauron baby, Sauron daddy, do you wanna give me some orders?" And I think he comes in to confront him actually, but he's a little bit skeptical about the whole situation. Like he's been growing more resentful of Adar
Yes,
the whole
Adar.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he goes up to him and he's basically like ready to arrest him, but he and Sauron goes, "What's your name, Uruk?" And then he's kind of disarmed and charmed.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that that was a really good way to say, like, okay, all Sauron did was put them in a situation where a lot of them would be dying, and then he can just come
Right.
in as the savior, right? He put them in a
Right.
tough situation so that he could come in as their
Mhm.
savior.
Mm-hmm.
And and if he's already in their minds. He's already in their spirits. He knows
Sure.
he knows how to manipulate them already. He's mapped them all out.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like when David makes me say the human heart in conflict with itself. That's how I know he's Sauron me.
I don't even have to say anything anymore, and you say it yourself.
I
The
even said it
Uruk
once.
heart in conflict with itself
That's right.
in this scene. The Port of Pelargir is next. Let's go on. Isildur gives a tearful farewell to Theo, bonding with him over the loss of their mothers. Estrid comes in to confess her love for Isildur. They kiss, and Isildur invites her to Numenor. Before they can leave, Kemen arrives to retake the settlement for the Kingsmen. Isildur tries to resist, but Kemen threatens the low men. Kemen orders the men of Pelargir to start felling trees for the royal fleet. They're just trees.
Yes, they're just trees. I caught that line too.
And did you see the glance that went between Theo and Hagen and Estrid?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're like, we're screwed. We're screwed.
Yeah.
No,
the Lorax
no,
is going to
no.
come in.
They're screwed because of the Ents.
The Numenorians are.
The Numenorians.
Yeah, but who's going to be doing the labor? And I don't think the Ents are too into like ask questions before you shoot. You know, like I think they're pretty. Like, did you see? What's the Ent wife's name again?
Whose wife?
The Ent wife.
Oh, the Ent wife. Winterbloom.
Winterbloom was ready to smack everyone down.
Yeah,
you see that? She sees somebody with an axe, they're dead.
Smack first and ask questions later.
If the Lomen are able to, go, hey, these guys want us to cut, or they need, they could maybe goad them into action.
All right, so we'll have to have a full season of the Ent moot.
Is this in sync? So for the Numenorians showing up and going, oh, you want food? We need wood. As opposed to, oh, you guys are hungry. Here's some food. I think we've talked about that in the past, where when the Numenorians were coming and helping, at some point it flipped, and then they came and they started exploiting.
Right.
So this was a nice, proper lore, because in the first season they came to help, and now they're coming to exploit.
Right.
They turned from ambassadors into colonists.
Right. Which is what they're going to set up a watchtower here and garrison their troops, and yeah.
And oh, by the way, I don't think that it was Kemen threatening the Lomen that caught Isildur up short so much as threatening to slaughter Beric.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
We did get a farewell shot to Beric. They gave us one shot of Beric there, framed in the little archway, and I was like, oh,
Beric the Brave.
But is he leaving him behind?
I think they said that there was room for the horse. I mean,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, their ships their ships are capable.
It's a Numenorian horse.
I know what they're going to do with Beric. Yeah. I know what they're going to do with Beric, and I hate it.
Oh, don't spoil us.
Play your little thing.
I don't think it's not canon. It's not canon.
Okay.
I think I know what they're going to do with Beric.
Right,
Can I take a guess?
Something horrible?
I think they're going to do something too cutesy.
Oh,
I think they are going to make Beric the ancestor of Shadowfax.
That's weird.
I don't know if I want to know that or not.
Shadowfax is one of the Maoris. He's
Shadowfax is from
Orome's horse.
Takes two horses to make another.
Yeah, John. We'll see.
I'm just saying.
It's an interesting idea. I hope you're wrong.
This show is very into making every connection it can to Lord of the Rings possible.
No, you're not wrong.
I think they might be placing Beric in the line of ancestry of Shadowfax.
Well,
if Beric's going to be stranded in Middle Earth, I don't think he's done as a character.
Yeah, they just showed him saying goodbye. They didn't actually, show him getting loaded onto the ship or anything like that. So,
and I suppose once Kemen offers to slaughter him, he's like, "Right, I'm out of here."
But why?
But he wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that. No Numenorian would do that to a horse.
Isildur would stay behind.
Right.
Well, this Numenorian would, but
but I think he would. I think Kemen would be in a lot of trouble with the Numenorian soldiery,
with everybody else.
With his own crew. Right. Can we just get rid of the dude? God, like Kemen.
Well, he is definitely showing Caligula vibes. I don't know how much you know about Caligula. He was the son of a general who eventually became emperor and was like a sort of a figurehead, a symbol for the troops, and so they called him Caligula, which meant little boots, because he'd march around in a full-grown uniform when he was 6 years old in Oz, and they didn't
call him Caligula, and then he said, "I think they'll call me Caligula."
You're stretching tonight, John.
Sorry.
I'm doing a Grand Elf joke, guys. I'm
completely over my head.
You're stretching.
I don't get the craw part. But he's definitely a little boots bully.
Right, for sure.
The worst kind, just constantly needing to prove his quote-unquote strength. And, your father's a traitor, and I'll slaughter the horse, and so on and so on and so on. And his robes just look pure imperial Rome to me.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going for the Byzantine Moroccan look, but in the case of Kemen, they're really jazzing it up. And yes, I see that his arm is in some kind of a sling at this point, so clearly he hasn't finished with his PT yet.
Right.
It takes a long time. It's a long process.
That line, Theo's advice, don't pack a dagger in a bag for a journey. My first thought was, security will compensate it.
Well, he did put it in the bag, too, without a sheath, I think.
Yeah, that was a little short-sighted.
You're going to reach in to grab your tissues. Owies.
And oh, by the way, there's loons here in Pelaglia as well as in the Grey Havens. So
Is
just saying.
Is Loman a low man? Is there how much lore is around the terminal that thing?
It's a show creation.
Yeah. I think it's just supposed to be derogatory.
Versus Numenorian, right? Because if they're
it's just men and the Numenorians, right? Like they're look, there are other, I'm not going to go deep into this right now, but there are other strains of men out there.
Right. That's what I was wondering if this was if one of those, was going in that direction.
This is just vanilla men,
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just like,
they only have a couple flavors in soft serve,
Some of them are dark, and maybe they just got tired of saying dark wizard, dark man.
But it's like, oh, you're from, New York City and I'm from,
Brooklyn.
Yeah. No, Queens. No, Staten Island.
Queens. Okay. All right.
Long Island. Staten Island is out of New York City because they're going to come for you.
Yeah.
Long Island.
Anyway, but as a more of a, we're from a better place than you are kind of thing.
Oh, definitely. It's a question of superiority and inferiority. Right. I also privately amused, forgive me for indulging here, but I felt sorry for Hagen, obviously, with the whole triangle going on here. Mm-hmm. But I also feel sorry for him that he has the name Hagen because this is the name of the son of an evil dwarf in Wagner's Götterdämmerung. So he's definitely not a nice feature. Though he seems to have started cleaning up really nicely now that he's under the influence of the free folk of Pelagia and the occasional good Numenorian.
Well, and he's half the leader, right? Isn't that what...
He's the leader of
right.
the wild men who are becoming less wild, and Theo is the leader of the townies. The townies.
Yeah, and they establish that when Kemen shows up.
Right.
They're like, hey, I'm half the leader, and Kemen's like, whatever.
And I mean, why should they expect him to know that anyway, right? I mean, that was a little.
But Kemen's acting.
Kemen didn't get the signal, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, They were doing it in a ritual way, like, "Oh, you're the leader. Hey, I'm the leader here, and let's treat now, and let's do the formulas." But Kemen is just like, "Oh, we're Numenorians. We're building a garrison,
and if you want to eat, you're going to bring us timber."
Yeah.
I gotta say, if you want to be taken seriously in diplomacy, maybe don't elect Theo. Right, like the guy, he doesn't have facial hair yet. I think we gotta think about this, guys.
Oh, John, you just raised a sore point for an awful lot of people who love the lore. None of the Numenorians ever had facial hair.
Well, I'm just messing
because they were descended from dwarves.
But in seriousness,
excuse me, they were descended from elves.
Right.
I don't really understand, and I think this was a little sloppy. I don't really understand how Theo is just the leader. That's really pretty fast too. Yeah. No, I mean they're trying to put him into this position for, I think, a future role. And here's the cue for Frodo's comment.
Right.
Keep your secrets.
Yeah. I think there's a couple roles he could fill.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards one. Let's not go there.
No, I have my favorite in mind. We'll see.
There are two other interesting things that were brought up in this scene, though. So again, on the surface, the questionable things, but underneath, there's some really cool things. One was this whole idea of mistaking kindness for love.
Yes,
and some things can't be fixed, and you just got to carry them. Mm-hmm. And that's when Theo and Isildur were talking. He's like, "How do you deal with the death of your mom?" And he's like, I don't very well.
Not very well.
I thought that was a great line.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. I like that they're finally allowing Isildur to have some, inner reflectiveness and stepping aside from himself and saying, "Yeah, I really have not handled this well."
Because we get that later. The theme echoes back again later towards the end of the episode, where some things that are broken can't be fixed.
Right.
And you just gotta make do.
But also, you have really conflicting characterizations of Theo, right? You're going to tell me he's going to be the leader, but he's also the one asking for like pretty basic life advice of how do you deal with grief. And not that you can't do that as a leader, but it just feels like he's not at the place where he can effectively lead a group of people and be the one people go to for their advice.
Well, the standout that he has is he's a healer. He has incredibly valuable knowledge. And it takes a certain amount of maturity to be able to carry that out effectively, I think. I think he is also the son of Bronwyn, and they even say that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And
Theo's son of Bronwyn.
Clearly had status.
Yep.
And, oh, by the way, she was partnered for a brief time with Arondir, who is no longer there, but still there is that kind of suggestion of, okay, these are not your run-of-the-mill wild people.
And in their temporary...
Or even Southlanders.
In their temporary confinement under the Treants, he got close to... I forget the other guy's name. Hagen.
Good point.
And so they learned, something. And then I think Theo has demonstrated some bravery, right, and courage.
Oh yeah,
in,
for sure.
in a number of situations. So yeah, maybe he's emotionally still got a lot of growing to do. But
that's probably true of most of the wild men. If we're honest,
he's a model UN champion, so you got to give him the leadership.
But yeah, I do agree. I think they're setting him up for future.
Yeah.
Things.
Also, are the people of Pelargir just listening to Arondir on everything? Like, does he have the power to?
Arondir's gone.
Well, I know. I'm saying the fact that he appointed Theo there, right? Like, he basically appointed Theo.
That's a good point.
The leader of Pelargir on whose authority, right? Strange elves pulling swords out of
yeah, right.
Strange
I'm not sure that was supposed to be taken as official statement. I think he was telling Theo,
just be a man.
You're going to be the leader of these people. They will follow you.
But why? Have we seen any qualities of leadership from him?
Because the writers want him to be.
Outlined them.
Again, I just don't. Again, this is something where I think the show has done this a few times, and I feel like I'm being negative tonight, and I really hate that I'm being negative.
Yeah, we are being a little. We are biting on a little bit.
But a substantive critique of this show, I think, is that sometimes they earn it, but sometimes they don't, and sometimes they just claim the victory lap without earning it.
Sure.
And I think they did that with Theo here.
Could be.
All right. Well, let's go on.
I still think you're undervaluing healers. But.
Well, listen, I played World of Warcraft for a while, and let me tell you something. I was a healer. Nobody's asking the healer to leave the dungeon, right? Like, the healer needs to... The healer is very busy. You have a lot of things to do. You can't be worried about what direction to go in. So,
well,
and David, speak up on the D&D side. Is the healer leading the party?
Generally, not.
It's the tank,
not
right?
in the front. Well,
it's the tank.
But Pelargir is not looking for conflict. It is not a battle society. It is not trying to go on quests or kill.
Let me mix my metaphors, Marilyn.
Mix away, John. Just don't put too much salt in.
All right. Last scene before we take a break. The Doom of Adar. Galadriel is brought to Adar, who has been restored to his pure elvish form by Nenya. Adar gives Nenya back to Galadriel, and they agree to destroy Sauron together. Adar says he will take his children back to Mordor and forgives Galadriel for killing so many Uruks. Adar returns to his orc form, and his orcs return to him, carrying the wounded right hand of Adar, Glug. Glug. I can't get it right. They drop the axe and stab Adar to death, and Sauron appears to claim Morgoth's crown. Sauron orders the orcs to raise Eregion. Galadriel then attacks Sauron, but he blocks the blow with Morgoth's crown and demands Nenya and the Nine Rings.
Right.
I did not see this coming, and I thought it was fabulous.
Oh, really? I thought Glug was gonna.
No, not the Glug part. That I saw a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Nenya healing Adar.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
that was cool.
That was extraordinary, and the grief I felt about what could have been.
Yeah,
was they just they hit all the right notes. Let's make a lasting peace. Adar was the name I earned. Help me get it back. I forgive you for slaughtering my children. Let this ring create a lasting peace. I mean, I wanted it to be true, but they were filming it at the Dutch camera angle again. And so that said to me, not necessarily don't trust Adar, but it's not going to work.
Right.
And of course I knew it wasn't going to work anyway, because it's,
So
he's got to get out sometime, because Sauron is going to take over the show.
The just on this point of Adar and Galadriel and Nenya, before the sort of et tu brute, et tu glug scene happens.
it's a worm tongue rip, right? Like I think it is.
How so?
Wormtongue is the one who kills Saruman.
Right, but I was doing the Et tu, Brute, which goes back to Julius Caesar.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to say that this is a Jacksonian ripoff here.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Go on,
Okay,
go on.
I got you.
Go back to your
you.
Brutus. Get back to your Caesar.
No, I was going to get back to Adar because he takes off the ring and the effect fades slowly.
Yes, I didn't notice that. So
Yeah, it totally does. And he
no, I
returns.
believe you. I just
Yeah. And so then I was wondering, well, so what's the mechanic of the ring here? Was he only wearing it temporarily, and so is his hurt so deep that it would take Nenya years and years and years to actually fix what's underneath on the surface superficially. He can return himself. So maybe if it were longer. But then I thought it was also interesting that the whole thing with the name, because we've got the stranger over here looking for his name, and here we've got Adar who's like, I don't need that name no more. I'm that person is long gone, and I'm fine with Adar.
And he can't even remember it anymore.
Is that what? Do you think he can't remember it?
He said, "I can't remember my original name."
Okay,
and it was a meaningless name anyway.
Right.
Adar was the name I earned.
Right.
Help me get it back.
Right. And then this idea with the ring, we can heal, and I am with honor. I'm going to give you, like when he gave the ring back, I was like, wow.
Yeah. That more than anything else convinced me that this was real on his part.
So he's got to die. Right,
well, I knew he was going to have to die just anyway because Sauron.
Yeah, because we have to have the Lord of the Rings.
Sauron.
I think it makes sense for his orc form to come back. I mean, we know from the Lord of the Rings, which again, our spoiler policy is the Lord of the Rings is fair game, that when the rings lose their power because the One Ring was destroyed, the Elvish lands begin to fade again.
Right.
And so, the speeding, the fading has been hastened by this loss of the rings. So it makes sense to me that Adar was beginning to be healed, but the minute you take the ring away, he stops healing as much.
Yeah. Right.
And if he could have worn it for 100 years or whatever, then
maybe it
might have been complete healing. But
or been living within a sanctuary that was created and that had healingness to it. Yeah.
Sure.
What was he praying? Was he praying? He was in sort of a repose? There were some glyphs on that, or some rune, or some decorations on that rock.
Very Celtic design.
Yeah.
I think we were supposed to think of it as a sort of a henge or.
Well, there's definitely a Stonehenge that they jump down later when they're fighting.
Right.
Sauron fighting. But it just seemed interesting. He was kind of, and I didn't know if they were just doing it for the camera, the drama where he can stand up and reveal himself. But he was definitely sort of in a,
Yeah, well, they had to have some reason why he wasn't facing them right away.
Yeah.
Although he could have just been looking out in the distance as far as that goes. But I don't know. I wondered about that too.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a certain amount of, if not outright pain, then struggle or energy going out.
Sure, when you're healing, sometimes
healing
all your energies are
your energies going into the healing.
Yeah. That makes sense. So Adar got done like he did Sauron. So there's a little turnabout here.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mirroring, it's
straight, simple mirroring for sure.
Yeah.
I have a question though. Adar's I always get them confused. I always forget which one is it, the Hro or Freya?
The Hro is the body,
right?
Which is the one that you expend,
right?
The Freya is the spirit, which is immortal and does not fade.
So Adar's Freya is going to is going to the halls of Mandos.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But if Sauron were actually ever killed, where would he go? Is he serially longeval?
He's a Maya.
He's a Maya.
He is. Now, if his body were killed, as we saw,
it turned to slime and
his Freya was still there, right? Like his spirit was still there.
Right.
Okay.
And so he had a choice there, right? He could either spend a long time reconstituting his body, or he could go back to Valinor and beg them for a new raiment.
Okay. All right. So he'd go back to Valinor.
He could.
Well,
it would be optional.
Okay.
Again, Lord of the Rings spoiler here. At the very end, he becomes a figure of smoke and mist and whatever, and is literally blown away. So the implication is having lost so much of his native power and so on and so on, he can't hold it together anymore, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. And
Gandalf talks about
each time he goes down.
Each time his body is destroyed and has to be rebuilt,
right.
he loses some strength and, he becomes more evil and then can't take on a fair form anymore, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
As it goes along. So in the end, Gandalf says, he'll just become a spirit gnawing himself in the frustration or whatever, but he will never be able to reform him and he will never be able to really have power over anything or anyone. So not dissimilar to what happens to Sauron, who coincidentally is also a Maiar.
Yeah. But also a Maiar with more limitations, right? It's interesting. We had an interesting question from Cyrus on the Discord today of, did the Valar create the Maiar? And the answer is, did you create the Istari? That was the question. And the answer is no. They were already existing as Maiar. But the Valar did place the limitations upon them that they go to Middle Earth with. And so that's sort of the interesting twist with them.
And I think it makes it confusing because they were in human bodies.
Yeah.
They weren't in Valar raiment that they could, or Maiar raiment that they could put on and take off and so forth. So the bodies could age, they could suffer pain, they suffered hunger, and so on and so on.
Right.
And that was an experience that I don't think any Maiar had ever had before.
Right.
So we lose Hazeldine he came in for one season.
Yeah, well, he did a fabulous
They
job.
bumped off like a couple of big characters in this episode. So if I think about it now.
Yep.
So
we got a bunch of other things to worry about.
Yeah. Big costume change for the big S here for Sauron.
His outfits throughout this season were really
drip.
shifting.
Is that what
they were we are going to be on the cover of Variety, and you cannot show us.
Exactly. I will say though, big Thulsa Doom energy on his outfit, and if you know that reference, you'll get it. But his costume made me think of another fantasy character on movies. James Earl Jones in as Thulsa Doom in Conan the Barbarian. These sort of snaky things, this sneaky motif. So anyway.
Okay. What do you guys think of the exchange between Galadriel and Sauron? All this was by your design, and Sauron says, "You think too much of me."
What did he say? The road is ever winding? And
he was doing poetry.
Thank God he didn't say the road goes ever on and on. I really would have smacked something if he had.
All right, but Marilyn, we can agree that this was an attempt to invoke that, right?
Yeah, it was.
I can't imagine what else it was, John.
So,
I mean, I
but
think,
setting that aside, just that initial statement and response. This was all by your design. You think too much of.
Well, what are you driving at? Are you just caught you or?
Well, we start off thinking about Sauron as being the big bad and having so much power that eventually he can control everything, and he certainly wants you to think that. But they do seem to be pointing to some ability to resist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Particularly if you know what's going on. I mean, that always helps, right? And I think a lot of his skill lies not in being the grand architect of design, but of being an improviser.
Yeah.
Not unlike Morgoth, if you think about it, because it was Morgoth improvising on the original theme and then eventually breaking off altogether and starting his own stuff. So a lot of people say this about Sauron throughout. This is his plan all along. Galadriel was screaming at Adar when he decided to take all the orcs off and so forth. I don't know. How much foresight does he have? How much did this? I don't think he foresaw the dwarves coming in.
Clearly not. For
instance, and although he was very angry with the increasing closeness that was developing between Celebrimbor and the dwarves, that was not his plan.
Yeah,
he wanted all the peoples of Middle Earth to be quite separated out.
Right.
So I'm not sure that he had a master plan all along that said, okay, I know you're going to do this, and therefore I'll do this, and then you're going to do that, and I'll do this. Because that doesn't allow for free will. And it assumes that people are too predictable that way. But Sauron saying, you think too much of I mean, a lot of it was in the way Vickers delivered the line. you could interpret it so many ways. I mean, shucks,
Yeah.
you're thinking too much of me.
I think the false modesty of a narcissist to pull you in.
Yeah, okay. That was pretty much what I was thinking here. But at the same time, maybe she is thinking too much of him. Maybe that is part of Sauron's power, is that he gets you thinking.
Yeah.
Whatever I choose, it's going to be the wrong choice because he's already plotted it out 5 moves ahead. A lot of people talked about Sauron playing chess and thinking 5 moves ahead and anticipating that this would be the response and so on. Yeah, he does a lot of that. But there still is this possibility of, the unexpected thing happening, which of course is
free will.
Free will. It's also eucatastrophe, which we'll be talking about.
And Herbert
in the Lorecast
deals a lot with that in Dune. Part of that, one of the big underlying engines of Dune is when things are easy and we're complacent and we just know the next thing to do, then we actually start to diminish our potential. And that actually will lead us into a genetic ruin, as it were.
Interesting. For Tolkien, it was you're going to lead yourself into a downfall if everything is too easy.
Right. And Foundation and Asimov do the same thing. And of course, Herbert is building off of Asimov in that regard. And so the idea that Herbert was pushing forward was we need to be on the edge of uncertainty. Because as a species, that is what activates our creativity, our empathy, our emotions. It actually pushes. We then stretch further out, and that's the only way that we're going to survive on a genetic level is if we're constantly on that edge.
Yeah. Oh, one more question: how are you supposed to have a sword fight with an archangel? In this case, an angel. Particularly when he has this mega crown of death and evil.
Yeah,
well, we had to have the fight.
It is. I think it has to be someone like Galadriel, right? It has to be someone who is one of the older elves who saw a Calaquendi who saw the light of the trees, lived through the First Age. Because we do know there were elves in the First Age who went toe to toe with Sauron, right? Luthien is the named one. Finrod is another. Galadriel's brother. And so I think it's fine that she goes toe-to-toe with him and loses. I think that makes sense to me.
Well, and I suppose it could give her that final wisdom to say, all right, Celebrimbor was right. We're not going to do this by power.
Celebrimbor is right is not something I expected to hear this episode.
Seriously. But there you are. I mean, that's great suffering brings about great insight.
Yeah. Just curious, John, are we, in terms of scene organization, are we going to talk about the final scene between these two a little bit later on in linear order?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah. I didn't know if we were going to smoosh them together, but I think you wanted to move us to a break real quick.
Yeah, but I just wanted to final point here. It felt too much like the required boss battle of a video game.
It did.
I'm not going to,
because we already had a confrontation at the end of season 1. And it was brilliant, and it was mind games, and that's what Sauron does. So now we have to have the physical confrontation.
I will say that it did go on a little bit longer than it would have been quicker. I think you're right. So even
but I would
for
totally play the licensed video game of this, like that sounds really fun.
I will say Clark had a great look on her face though when he shows up, and she's just petrified. And you can feel the fear around her heart, and she's trying to control her emotions because her abuser just showed up.
Right, she does.
He broke the restraining order, and he's, he's there, right?
Yeah, seriously.
She really brought the mighty Morphet out of that Galadriel.
Yeah,
yeah. And yet, at the end of it all, she was able to say, "The door is shut." And I think she needed to know that she could do that.
Yes, right. To reclaim herself and reclaim her agency of that. Yeah.
And so in that regard, I thought it was good to have a final confrontation. I just don't know why it had to be, swords and crowns and,
jumping around Stonehenge and having big rocks fall down and stuff like that. Yeah. And again, I think it goes to this thing is that they're amping it up, and they didn't need to amp it up because the drama is inherent in their relationship.
Right.
It should be. Yes. And they showed that beautifully at the end of season.
You don't need to push it further than it needs to be pushed.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we will finish up the episode. right, and we're back. And we definitely didn't just take a 24-hour break because this podcast was getting 2 hours long already.
No. Of course not. Why would we do that? Oh, and I just had a brainstorm. I realized.
A 24-hour brainstorm.
No, it didn't take quite that long.
Okay, that's
the
good.
astronomer's name is actually Christine Larsen.
Okay.
Larsen, and I'm sure she's got a lot of stuff out there on the web. And anytime I have seen her speak, heard her speak, or read any of her stuff, it's been fantastic. So by all means, check her out.
Very cool. I think too, last night, I noticed that a lot, we were very critical heavy and less, I don't know, we were a little bit hard on the show yesterday, I think.
Well, the second half of the episode I did like a lot better. I just want to say that. Like it did flow better for me. I thought that the clunkier parts generally fell away, except the Grand Elf thing, which still bothers me. But we don't have to talk about that all night. But my point is, I did really enjoy all of these sequences. I know that we were talking about like maybe it feels like a boss battle, this whole like battle between Galadriel and I'm saying things weird tonight, Galadriel and Sauron. But honestly, I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I thought it was a really great way for her to sort of close out that arc. That it did feel to me like it was an incomplete arc at the end of season 1 because she feels like she has to lie about it to the other elves.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is a sense in which she does come to a point of completion. The door is shut. So, if that's how you're going to do it, that's how you're going to do it.
And I think yesterday, I forget who said it. I think Marilyn, maybe you had said it. Like the fact that she knows herself to have accomplished the door shutting exercise.
Right.
That she has regained her agency, and that is a huge step for her in her arc overall.
It is.
To know that she can actually refuse and step away from somebody who is so under whose enchantment she was so strongly, which then makes an interesting setup for Lord of the Rings Jackson movie when Frodo gives her the ring and she's able to refuse it because she knows she has that strength within her.
Well, and in the text, she actually does say, he seeks ever to, I know much of his mind and all of his mind concerning the elves, and he seeks to know my mind ever, but the door is shut.
Oh, that's a great line.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy Tolkien wasn't a bad writer.
He had his good days, didn't he?
He did. As Edith tended the children, he was in his study practicing, right? So why don't we get into the scene that we're kind of already talking about a little bit?
Yes.
Sure. I called it 2 battles. As the elves' forces start to falter, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm arrive to turn the tide. Galadriel and Sauron battle, sword to crown, as Sauron transforms into a mannish form and then a mirror of Galadriel. I didn't put in, but also a Celebrimbor form. A Celebrim form? Sauron mortally stabs Galadriel with his crown, declaring his former loyalty to her as she resists him. He takes the 9 rings and tries to compel Galadriel to hand over Nenya. After she feigns compulsion, she jumps off a cliff and with the ring. The orcs arrive and beg Sauron to retreat, but he kills Glug.
Glug. Pour one out for Glug.
Yep.
Yes.
I got to add him to the show guide just to take him away.
We can have some interesting glug, pour one outs if we want to go there.
We can pour one out for Glug. I just didn't want to pour one out for Damrod. Did you hear I made that the cold open on our last episode?
I think so. Yes.
When you said, like, can we pour one out for Damrod?
I remember. And that mannish form that Sauron took, I think, was a sort of an edited Halbrand. Because I saw him almost as Númenorian Halbrand. Well, what I saw was it looked like Halbrand, but the hairstyle was that of Elrond. So it was almost like an amalgam. At least that's what I saw. But listeners, write in. What did you see with that particular form?
What do you think, David? What kind of Hellbrand is that?
He didn't look like Hellbrand from season 1. He did look. He looked like he had a nice hairdo for season 2.
Exactly. He was dressed up and spruce.
Yeah, his armor was shiny and everything was trim and proper, and he looked. Yeah, he looked a little bit more shipshape. Where in season 1, he's a bit rougher around the edges. I agree.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel about the falling off the cliff thing, and I'm curious to know if there's any antecedents in the literature for that. I did like the stabbing with the crown, because it did kind of remind me of Frodo and the Morgul blade kind of thing, and that type of wound.
Interesting connection. I like that.
Oh yeah, I caught that too. Actually, that was one of the parts I didn't like about it, because I thought it was too much like, all right, we're doing it again.
Well, I was seeing it as a mirroring of the opening of the season.
Sure, yeah, that too.
I think overall that was my biggest takeaway is, all right, so it was done to you and now you're going to do it to everyone that you feel was standing in your way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I don't know we're completely off book here with this fight between the two.
Oh, Lord, yes.
Yeah. And there's nothing ever about Galadriel.
There's not really a lot of Galadriel at all in the Second Age in the writings.
No.
Okay.
Well,
So most of what you see with Galadriel in this is fiction. Is non-canon. It's all fiction, but...
And I think mostly
Fictionally
nothing of Galadriel in any kind of fighting situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's what a lot of people had a hard time getting accustomed to, particularly in the first season.
Although there are writings of Tolkien, particularly I'm thinking of Unfinished Tales from Numenor and Middle-earth, where Tolkien describes Galadriel as more of a warrior.
Oh, so in Silmarillion, she's described as joining the fight.
So
at the harbor of the ships. So it's definitely not outside her wheelhouse.
Right.
And she looked upon the dwarves of Khazad-dûm with the eyes of a general. So there's these little touches here and there. But
yeah, and I'm just not sure about her falling. I mean, that was much like Elrond did when he refused to give Gil-galad the ring.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, she survives somehow, because elves.
elf.
Yeah.
Well, I'm okay with the elves having like better stamina,
a better bounce factor.
And they're lighter, right? Like they're they're light-footed.
Feather, maybe
dirtier
she casted
bones.
Featherfall. Look, she's like a super elf. So being one of the original Noldor, I think super elf.
When they looked up, who was it? Arondir, and did Gil-galad or Elrond look up? I know Arondir did. And it was kind of like a star falling.
Mm-hmm. And with their elf eyes, they could see her falling.
For sure.
I was fine with the fall. I didn't like it as much as the Elrond thing. I think we're overplaying that a little bit now.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing, and I liked Elrond a lot better because it connected to his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and he was plunging into water and
right. And he was jumping, not falling, right? Like there's a difference, right? Don't they do that, right? Like there's a certain amount of distance you'll be from the window if you jumped, fell, or were pushed. It's like a forensics thing.
I guess I haven't watched enough Law and Order to know that.
It's news to me.
All right.
But the one thing I did like about that is that finally Elrond found something more important than his pride, and finally accepted that the Elven rings could.
Oh, is this
do something good.
Okay, right?
Yeah, that's the next scene.
It's at the end.
Yeah.
We're still talking about dwarves and battle in Eregion and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
There is still a little bit more dwarf later, but I think actually no, most of the dwarven warring is here. Yeah,
right, with their machine gun crossbows.
I'm okay with it. I
would expect that they would have higher tech crossbows.
I missed that altogether.
The Ravager was less believable than the orc.
Yeah, the Ravager was a strange thing. But it was very convenient. They just show up at the last minute, and I just wish they had played that a little differently, personally.
Yeah, I was sad because I think I've said this a couple of times that I was really looking forward to the moment when Durin arrives at the head of his army and rescues Elrond. And okay, so they did it as close as they could within the context of what they were doing. And yeah, I get it. He can't go from watching his father die to leading an army.
Yeah,
being with his friend.
Shiva lasts 7 days, right?
That's true. You had something, Marilyn. I think it was in our private chat. Something about the scrolls and the trees and the.
Yes, I thought that was really interesting.
Say more.
That in season 1 we saw Sylvan elves who were willing to give up their lives to defend a tree.
Mm-hmm.
When they were all captured and in the trenches of the orcs, and they were ordered to cut down a tree.
Yeah.
And the elves said, look, this has been around here longer than you have, and so on and so on. And after Arondir sees at least one, if not more, of his comrades being cut down, he says, "Right, stop, I'll do it." And before he does, he asks the trees forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's what he was thinking of when Winter Blossom had him captured and said, "Have you ever set wood axe to living wood?"
Did we? I don't think we even talked about that in relation to season 1. That's actually an interesting.
No, I think Marilyn brought it up. Yeah.
I think we did touch on it
all right.
briefly, and I'm sure that's what he was recalling when he said, "To my great sorrow."
Yeah.
Yes, I have. And so now we see the Noldoran elves, and of course Elrond in particular, who is held up as a scholar, saying, "Kill me, but save the scrolls."
Mm-hmm.
And, the librarian in me gets that. I'm not sure that I would have the passion and or the courage to put myself in that position. But it really resonated for me as, okay, here's a way of seeing the differences.
Your moment of northern courage, Marilyn, throwing yourselves in front of the torch.
I mean, perhaps it's just that I do think that lives are more important. But
And also you're living in an age where we have mass media and not
right. And
the printing press has done wonders for not needing to sacrifice yourself for books.
Well, and things disappear daily from the internet. I mean, it's not like once it's there, it'll never go away, even though that's what people say. But, websites and preservation and everything, but don't get me started on that because I don't think that's why people are here to listen tonight. Basically, I just saw it as a really interesting way of highlighting the differences between these two types of elves.
Between a Sylvan elf and a Noldorian.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, if that is the only copy of whatever knowledge it is, it's a big loss.
And it's a way to, part of what I read into it was no one is going to be able to reverse engineer the rings.
Sure. To
either undo Sauron's influences or to create something that could be a counter to it, or, it's cutting off any future challenge to this ultimate power that was designed by this guy who's now dead.
And it's also a good way for the show to say, we're falling away from our former glories. Right? We've just lost this information that we had for thousands of years. And we're in the process of losing the one who created a lot of it. And, how can we ever recover that, reclaim that, whatever? So it's definitely, again, this feeling of a long defeat.
Much that once is lost.
Exactly.
None now live to remember it.
And is that actually Elrond in the Council of Elrond chapter?
I
don't know that Galadriel that's Galadriel, but in the movie, in the opening, I don't know if it's in the books.
Okay. Yeah. So who knows where it actually was? But anyway, it certainly sounds like something Elrond would say.
Another thing about the burning, just quickly too, and we had been talking about this. And by the way, within our 24-hour break, a blog post went up on our website, thelorehounds.com/blog, by our very own lore master Duve71.
Yes.
Who wrote a great little summation of the conversation that we had, Marilyn, about orcs versus uruks and the idea of inherent evil versus not inherent evil. I don't know how to, if that's the right way to say it. So
Chosen
go check
evil?
go check out that thing, that blog post. It's a really nice short article.
Very cool.
And Dude's a really good writer. He's very lucid in his writing style.
Definitely.
Lucid?
Lucid.
Okay.
Yes. Very clear.
I've not heard writing described as lucid before. I don't think.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think
for
it is.
lucid dreaming.
I think it is.
Yeah.
That's
Lucid writing. But this idea that this, so in this moment anyway, this is an orcish attitude to destroy knowledge and to be stubborn about it and to be like, oh, well, you don't want me to do this thing, so I am going to do this thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the obvious thing that was going to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whether or not it was knowledge or silk tapestries, it just,
right.
They were
right, and that embodies that idea of an orcish attitude, which is sort of uncaring, unempathetic, I think is maybe the way to put it.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Adar, had he been there, might have objected too. Who knows?
Good point.
But
there's a line in Jordan, and I don't remember if Tolkien says something similar, but eyes without pity.
yes, yeah,
Right.
yeah. I think Tolkien has said similar things, just maybe not with those exact wording, phrase or whatever.
So let's move on to another scene that I called Guess Who's a Ring Bearer?
Can we just, before we do, say, oh, maybe this is the scene?
Yeah, it's about Elrond.
That is. Go.
You're going to make me do another 20-minute per scene podcast, Marilyn? That's how we got to day 2 of this recording.
I am sorry.
I'm just
Carry
kidding.
on.
I'm just kidding.
I know you are.
Every thought that you bring. Gil-galad finds Galadriel with Arondir and tells Arondir that Galadriel is physically wounded, but also drawn into the Shadow Realm. He tries to heal her with Vilya, but it's not working. Elrond eyes Nenya and decides to bear it to heal her together with Gil-galad.
So what does Gil-galad's ring do? And when I wrote this in my note, I wrote this, what does Gigi's ring do? I then had a thought, because I was reacting to my own thought, which was, gosh, why do I need to know what the material function, what is the mechanistic aspect of this ring do? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That sort of belies my thought as to being a Western technologically driven kind of guy. Oh, what does my new, smartphone do? What are the features? What are the features of, these rings? I need to know their exact definition. And is it going to need a firmware update and, and all of this kind of stuff? And I don't know that.
Have you clicked on the show guide?
I haven't looked on the show guide, actually. That Tolkien necessarily, that wasn't the point. It wasn't a screwdriver or a widget driver or something. It didn't have to. I think it has more a fuzzy boundary of what it can do and what their purposes are.
When does Gandalf use his magic? When he needs to. It's very I agree with you, David. It's a soft magic system in a lot of ways.
Well, what we do know about the ring is that Gil-galad has is that it's the ring of air. Mm-hmm. And in most magic systems from the stories that Tolkien is drawing from, air has to do with knowledge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what the showrunners have him say is, by the power of the High King, I am driving out the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, air and light, I don't know if you can associate those two things or not. It's definitely not the Ring of Fire, of course, because that's with Círdan. And its function is to warm hearts and to encourage people and bring people together and so on. So the way I read it was, I, as the High King, have strong access to the light of the Valar and of the elves.
Yeah.
And I have authority over things of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But it is actually Nenya, which is associated with water. Water is associated traditionally with healing in this same, system of the 4 elements and so forth. So I think that was an interesting way of saying, yes, these rings have power, but they have specific powers as well, and it's best to use the right ring for the right job, as it were.
Right. But you're not going to look up on the product webpage the exact,
specifications. No.
Yeah, it has something to do too with the character of the wielder, and it has something to do with.
Yes.
So it has maybe the ring has an intent, not so much a purpose, but an intent or a suggestion of an area, right? And as opposed, do you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to get away from.
There's no rules. There's just vibes.
Exactly. It's a vibe ring. It's not a mood ring. It's a vibes ring.
Well, the thing that touched me the most and that was to me the most significant was Gil-galad admitting that, High King though he was, he didn't have
enough
the power to save her. And Elrond says, I do. We can.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the most important aspect of this was, the fellowship restored, if you will. Elrond is finally putting himself back in company with his companions and working together instead of, being a leader who was kind of standing alone and not really taking input from anybody else, recognizing that, yes, we can use these rings for good.
Right.
And in fact, in this instance, it's probably about the only thing that's going to save my friend's life. And maybe also the sight of her in an in an orcish cage, and later on, a prisoner of Adar and so forth, made him reassess his choices.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that was why, it was like, oh, thank goodness.
They did stretch it out, his decision-making process, a little bit.
Well, it shows his strength of will, doesn't it? If nothing else. Yeah. Which is a good thing, but it can also turn against you.
Now, is it spoilery to talk that he doesn't have a ring in the Lord of the Rings?
All right, then keep your secrets.
There. Okay.
No, actually, I think we can talk about that because we said we would talk about Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
He does have a ring in Lord of the Rings, but it is not Vilya.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it is Vilya. Why am I saying it's not Vilya? He gets Vilya in Lord of the Rings.
You just want to get added.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to bait it. Yes. So he has Vilya in.
And is that what helps him keep Rivendell?
Yes.
Yes.
All of the elven realms that remain, which it's really like two, the main ones.
Mm-hmm.
The two main elven realms that remain for the high elves, I should say. What, you're talking about Linden for the third one?
No, I'm talking about the Grey Havens.
That's what I meant. The Grey Havens.
Grey Havens, Rivendell, and Lorien.
Okay. But there's no ring in the Grey Havens anymore.
Because
starting off at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. I mean, yes, that is eventually true.
But like that's thousands of years before the start of Lord of the Rings, right?
It is. And I'll be very interested to see how the show decides to get that ring from Gil-galad to Elrond.
All right,
it's freely given.
Secrets. All right,
exactly.
Keep your secrets.
Oh, it's looping again.
It's looped.
That's why I said I'll be interested to see how they do it, because I don't know how they're going to do it.
Again, we're trying to do a very difficult thing here, which is we understand that everyone has seen the Peter Jackson movies pretty much, who's watching this show. And we're also trying to not spoil events that will get you to the Peter Jackson movie while still understanding that there is the Peter Jackson movie that you've seen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, yes, Elrond has Vilya, the Ring of Air, in the Peter Jackson movie. But I will add, don't let the air part mislead you. You see what he does with the Bruinen in Lord of the Rings, right? He can manipulate water too. It's not just
that's what I mean about
air. Yeah, there's no rules like that. Yeah.
Right.
It's not like Avatar The Last Airbender where everyone can control an element, but not the other elements.
Yeah, no, it's not that.
Or if you look up in the, Dungeon Master's Guide and you're like, oh, it's a ring of whatever, and it does this and that on a 2D whatever. And, there's not a specific, because in D&D, we're trying to delineate very carefully those rules so that we can actually create the shared fantasy, where in literature, we're approaching it in a very different way. So,
see, nobody was paying attention to the rules in Baldur's Gate because they were thirsting over Astarion.
Well, and in Tolkien, they're more like guidelines.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If sometimes you need to get away from the Sons of Feanor and you turn into a fucking bird, and that's fine. There's not a ton of rules, guys.
Fair enough.
All right. Let's move on to what I call the finale montage.
Mm-hmm.
Nori weeps at the destruction of the Store homeland, but Poppy launches into a monologue about how Sadok Burrows told her how to deal with things that are lost. We get a montage including the destruction of Eregion, Isildur looking longingly at Estrid as she holds Hagan. Is that how we're saying it?
I'd say Hagen.
Hagen?
I think they say Hagen.
Daz?
Yes, I was trying not to say it, but you said it.
Okay, I'll say anything.
Yeah, you will.
As she holds Hagen's hand, Miriel surrendering to Farazone, and Elendil fleeing a burning capital city. We also get Sauron holding the Hammer of Feanor as Poppy talks about building something new. And I'm going to read the Poppy quote here, the end of it. What's broke is broke and won't fix, and all anyone can do is try to build something new.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we get Sauron holding the Hammer of Feanor.
Right.
I wonder what he's going to do.
Well, I noticed one thing because I looked closely. There was no leather around the hammer of Theanor at that point. Now, my theory is that the leather was put around it for a particular smithing reason when it was being used by Celebrimbor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was later taken off. I couldn't really tell. There were sort of shapes that could have been gems, but I couldn't really tell if there were actually any gems in there or not. I just didn't remember any gems being in there from season 1. But
he's just got a metal allergy, so he has to protect his hands, you know.
And was anybody else reminded of Sam's speech at the end of the Two Towers?
I guess I wasn't. I haven't watched the Two Towers in quite a long time, so I missed
I kind of got the sun will come out tomorrow vibes. Although also it's an interesting contrast because Sam is saying, you know, the great tales, you know that the sun is going to shine all the clearer because people didn't give up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is different. This is saying sometimes you have to let go because you can't fix it.
Right.
Which I thought was a good message. Mildly preachy, perhaps, but it was also a useful way of kind of bringing us to the concluding points of all these different threads that we've been following.
Yeah. I will say it did feel so unnatural because they stretch it out to cover all those scenes.
Yeah.
And people just don't talk like that. And so that was my one complaint with it. But overall, I thought a very Tolkien-esque, you know, a monologue. I had no problems with the content itself.
Yeah, well, this is where we see the difference between determined courage and eucatastrophe. And those of you who listen to our subscribers will hear our lorecast on eucatastrophe.
Yeah.
To find out more what that means.
And we talked earlier when we were in Pelagir with Isildur and what's his name? The young Bronwyn's son, Theo. Thank you. About
the Witch King of Angstmar. I'm going to keep calling him that.
King of Angstmar. That you know, sometimes those hurts can't be fixed, and you just need to figure out how to carry on
with that grief.
with that wound, with that broken piece, whatever. And you know what? And in a way, that's okay, because if you're trying to fix it, you're trying to get past it. You're trying to maybe rush past something that you should just be with for a while.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's that holding on to that memory of that person or that time or that place over time that is going to, with time, is going to somehow integrate that into your being so that it's not broken, but it's not something that is, oh, happy joy, rainbow, you know, unicorn kind of, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like there's a part of life that is a kind of a melancholy that we need to kind of I don't know, is it a Nenya thing?
Absolutely. I mean, part of this is figuring out who you are now that that person is no longer a part of your life.
That's a really good way to put it.
Regardless of how they were taken away, what the event was.
Right.
But you are no longer who you were. And that realization, I think, doesn't really come until sometime after you started doing the grieving process for the person you have lost.
And it's a process, right?
It absolutely is. And if you're not given time to do it, that makes it even harder. And it looks like Theo doesn't have a whole lot of time because there's a lot of demands on his attention and so forth.
I just want to plug Never Mind the Music, our affiliate podcast, just did an excellent podcast on grief, where Nicole, with the psychologist of the pair, talked a lot about what grief is, why it's healthy, why it's her favorite emotion, I think she said.
Wow. Good on her.
I don't think to have, I think just as a concept, right? And I thought it was a very beautiful episode, and I'm planning to write in our Discord about my thoughts on the episode. So
that was the Bone Thugs and Harmony song, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was on. It was like a follow up to their Crossroads episode.
Right. Oh, okay.
Well, I wish Alicia was here right now because she would come up with the quote from WandaVision about grief being love that continues on after death or something like that. So apologies for mangling it, Alicia, but I'm sure somebody will write in and give us the exact words.
So I guess the stores have to do a little moving.
Stores are going to learn about migration.
So, it's not like we didn't see that coming the whole season. We're like, oh,
Sure.
these guys aren't going to be here for much longer. Yeah.
They're going to find the fallow hides too, aren't they?
Yeah.
We're going to get the
Eventually.
fallow hides. Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. Maybe they're already there. They're like, what took you guys so long?
And then, like I think we talked about this yesterday. Was the earlier in this podcast? Sorry, was what was the evidence against Muriel? We see him reading a scroll, but we don't have.
Yeah,
and that's where I was wondering if they're not kind of kicking that one to season 3.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it doesn't matter. We knew that even with the affirmation of the Valar in the form of the sea monster, Fadazon was not going to say, "Oh, okay,
right,
you're right. Come on back."
We're going to call this one a whoopsie daisy and just move on.
But it is kind of interesting because there was a suggestion from him looking in the Palantir that he was seeing Halbrand. So how is that? How are they going to conceptualize the keep your own secrets stuff that's going to be happening in the future?
Yeah, we're just going to have to move on from that thought because too spoilery.
Yep.
Far, far too spoilery. Let's thank the Grand Elf.
Yeah, I was sad that Nori didn't give him a hug. Poppy did.
Well, let's recap the scene quick.
Go.
The stranger is thanked by the stores, who all call him the Grand Elf. Nori tells him it's time for them to part ways. While he recognizes their differences, she notes their similarities. After she walks away, Grand Elf finds his staff. He takes it to Tom Bombadil, who helps the stranger determine that his name will be Gandalf. The stranger sits with Tom by the fire as they sing his theme song. Meanwhile, the dark wizard looks on menacingly.
And we see a nice shot of the hermit's hat overhead.
Yes, clearly. And that's the second time that they gave us the hermit's hat.
Mm-hmm.
I really do enjoy Bear's music as far as the Tom Bombadil thing. I could listen to it all day, right? It really feels like you're just sort of wandering through the forest, enjoying this relaxing song with your hermit friend.
Yeah, no, it is lovely. It is definitely lovely. And I really had the sense that Gandalf found his own name. I know you said you thought Tom was helping him along.
I think he sort of no, because he says, wizard finds his wizard doesn't find his staff Harry Potter, right? He does the Harry Potter thing.
Right.
Well, the wizard doesn't choose the wand chooses the wizard, Harry. We needed John Hurt there. But yeah, I and then he goes, same thing as a name, and that's what cues the stranger to be like, oh, they're gonna call me Gandalf. So he does, I think, lead him to that water.
Okay.
At the same time, I don't know how you make the leap from Grand Elf to Gandalf. That's something that definitely, look, over thousands of years, which is presumably what's going to happen now. Yes, Grand Elf can turn into Gandalf. Sure. But for him to just be like, well, they just called me Grand Elf a minute ago. They're going to call me Gandalf. I thought that was wildly unbelievable and way too cute, and I did not enjoy it. And that's as much as I'm going to say about that, because I just did not like that. I don't know why they can't write dialogue for this guy in the last episode of each season.
What there was no precedent for them to refer to him as an elf.
There was actually in an earlier season, in an earlier episode, I think they were like, oh, is he as big of as an elf? And they're like, bigger. And they're like, oh, so like a grand elf? And then they go, no, a wizard.
That's right.
Okay.
And
so they did seed that earlier. Because people flagged that. People clocked that and were like, oh, that's how he's going to get Gandalf.
Right.
And as some listeners and people who wrote in suggested, he did get his staff from the Gund tree.
Oh, was it from the Gun's tree?
I'm pretty sure it was.
I think so, yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Also, I like that. I noticed on my second one that Nori actually places it where he's going to find it.
Oh, I missed that.
It was on her feet. It was like in her way, and she placed it right on the ground where he ended up finding it.
Oh, interesting.
Huh. Okay.
I also noticed that Tom Bombadil pours 2 cups of tea before the stranger even walks in. So
He was
clearly
already
using his
My guy
powers
doesn't
of
have any
observation.
limitations.
But I will ask one more time, what was the whole point of teasing the Gandalf identity once we knew he was a good wizard?
The showrunners have, I kind of noted this, that I'm kind of glad we're done with this part now, and I'm glad this didn't carry on into season 3. I would have gotten a little exhausted by it. But they did, it was almost like we're being clever, wink, wink, we're setting up this.
Too much forced mystery box.
Yes, exactly.
I just thought it was overdone. I mean, the hints were only meaningful to the people who already knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is most of the viewers. And pretty much useless to the ones who'd never heard of Gandalf before, which is probably a very small number.
Yeah.
And
I mean, listen to our year-end podcast for 2022, and you'll hear me complain all day about mystery boxes. Like, I was just so sick of them at the point. And I think I've moved past that, and I do enjoy a good mystery box again now. But this was not a well-done one.
Mm.
And I'm really sad to not have gotten Blue Wizards.
I am too.
I would have loved to have seen their creativity and how they explored that whole basically unexplored section. I wonder if the Tolkien estate said, no, you can't do that.
I think that's likely.
I would agree that it's likely that they're trying to keep a tight box around what they're releasing.
Yeah.
Such that they don't then end up in a situation where, oh, well, this director already did that, or that writer already did something, and now we're stuck with it. Like there's we don't want to use it so that it doesn't get altered or
set in stone.
Set in stone, yeah, because we all now have Jackson's movies in our heads about what a Balrog looks like or something like that.
Right. And that's controversial.
Mm-hmm.
That is very controversial, that Balrog. Anyway, yeah, I agree with you, David, and Marilyn. I think that this was a rights issue. And I think it's not necessarily that they rejected it, but like, if you need something from your parents, you're a kid, right? You need something from your parents. You have so much social capital with them, right? Like, if I ask you for 3 things that are like difficult asks in a row,
sure,
it gets less likely with each ask.
Sure.
Right.
So they probably had their own prioritized list.
Right. It's like, all right, well, we want to mention this. We want to have a statue of Nienna. We really want to have that. Do we want that, or do we want to have the Blue Wizards? Choice is yours. I do think there's probably something like that going on. You ever watch Jack Black beg Led Zeppelin to let them use the Immigrant Song in School of Rock?
No.
He stood. You've never seen School of Rock?
I don't think I have. I mean, I'm very well aware of it. I know.
Okay, well, there's a whole big scene where you can
do a Jack Black Film Festival in our next 11
Yeah,
days.
I'm absolutely doing that now. Anyway, so they wanted to use the Immigrant Song because they were like, we can't do a movie about rock and roll without Led Zeppelin. And so he stood on the stage where they're filming the finale scene, and he begged to the camera for Led Zeppelin to let them use the song, because Led Zeppelin notoriously does not let people license their music.
Right.
And it worked. And they bit after he sent this like plea with all the kids in the background.
Fair enough. And the Immigrant Song's a good song.
Yeah.
It's one of their greats.
All right.
Oh,
who do we think the Dark Wizard is? We talked about this. Everybody thinks it's Saruman. I'm hoping it's not.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I mean,
David,
I wish it wasn't, but I really don't see how it couldn't be, given all the quote unquote hints that they've been giving us.
And given what we just talked about from a rights standpoint,
exactly,
that those are the blues are boxed out. It's Radagast, Saruman, and
I mean,
and
Dark
Gandalf.
Radagast. Give it to me. Give it to me. Give me evil. Like I said, Sylvester McCoy. He can regenerate. He's the Doctor. We got it.
Yeah. So and he's calling him his friend, right? It's that whole
old friend. Yeah.
So
friend.
I didn't point it out when we got to the other scene. So there's 3 false friends in this episode, and I kept forgetting to go through this.
Good pick.
So you have the Stranger and the Dark Wizard.
Mm-hmm.
You have Kemen and
Yes.
Isildur.
Yes.
And you have Celebrimbor being called Melon by Sauron.
Oh,
So false friends was a theme throughout this whole episode.
Good pick.
nice. Very nice.
Well done.
Yeah. Yeah, I do this sometimes. I do some podcasting. All right.
Oh, final thought. I was pretty happy with the portrayal of Bombadil. I thought they got that right.
Yeah, I do too.
I do too. Yeah. No, I liked the balance.
Bearded Yoda was excellent.
I think if it was going to be a tough depiction to make no matter what. And the sides of the trail were steep on both sides with jagged rocks down below on either precipice. And I think they walked it. And I really enjoyed it. And I think I liked the contemplative Tom Bombadil as opposed to, when we read it's jaunty and, bouncy and what have you. But I think that belies the fact of who and what Tom represents, like we talked about in our lore cast, that there's something deeper and more connected and contemplative about Tom.
And gentle, right? Like he's always gentle with the hobbits. And I think sometimes with like the songs that feel like all caps, it's really hard to get that out of the writing. I don't know. I think Tolkien might not have adequately portrayed Tom Bombadil for what he wanted him to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to some degree, I wonder if Tolkien. Well, I know he didn't know specifically what he wanted him to be.
That's true. So the next scene is called "Okay, They're Doing Dwarven Politics." Durin 4 gets a briefing that the elves of Eregion were led to safety in a valley north by Elrond. Narvi tells Durin and Disa that Durin's brother is gathering support for a rival claim, and that the dwarf lords are not wholly behind him following his father's taxation efforts. Durin looks at dwarven rings.
Yeah.
So the rings haven't been given out, and Durin the Third was just collecting every piece of gold and treasure and thing that he could from the other lords.
But he offered them to them. So I think what they're leaning towards, and I'm realizing this now, I think what they're leading us towards is Durin said, pay a lot of tribute to me and I'll give you a ring each. And now they're going to come to collect next season. And Durin 4 is not going to want to give them away.
Well, and Narvi specifically says the Blue Mountain Dwarves want their debts paid, Okay, Khazad-dûm, you owe us.
But all that gold is just sitting there. It's a durable good. You can return it. I mean,
no refunds.
Once you've given it to us, that's it.
No
well,
refunds.
I have
that's
a feeling that
it has the bodega refund policy. No refunds.
I think it was a case of, we really want a ring. And as a result, we will do something that we've almost never done before, and that is give away a whole lot of our own treasure and so forth, and expect to get a return on that investment with whatever the ring is going to do to help.
Yeah.
But there would have been tales told about Durin the Third and his behavior and attitudes and the kind of stuff that he was getting up to with the ring, so you have a counter narrative if you wanted to use it to convince
Or are you
people.
just telling me that because you're trying to keep the rings for yourself?
Right.
Good point.
And we know that he didn't like his son, so...
Right.
David, we have video footage of events here today that people deny and are truthers about, right?
Yeah.
Do not doubt the ability of people to believe exactly what they need to believe to move forward, right?
Seriously.
I'm going to bring back Mrs. Davis because I watched it recently and I loved it again. Is this idea of I don't tell people the truth, I tell people what they want to hear.
What to hear. Yep.
And I think people tell themselves what they want to hear all the time.
Well, and unfortunately, there were 4 eyewitnesses to Durin III's courageous demise. One is the son in question, so his opinion doesn't count. 2 is his wife, so she's out on suspicion. 3 is Durin IV's best friend, Narvi. So again, questionable. And then there's this fourth dwarf who comes along at the last minute. And I don't know who he is and what his position is and so forth. But, if he is in favor of Doran the Fourth, he's just one voice and can easily be discounted. If Doran's brother, who we don't even know the name of yet, decides he wants to try for a palace coup.
I'm trying to find this episode of the original series of Star Trek where there was like an evil alien entity that trapped some Klingons on the Enterprise, and they all were fighting with swords and stuff like that. And this idea that this entity fed on their conflict, and so it created conditions where they had to be in conflict.
I have a memory of that. I don't have any visual memories of it, but I think it ended with, Kirk standing next to an oversized Klingon captain, and they were slapping each other on the back.
That was it. That was the one.
That's about all I remember from that episode.
There's kind of a similar concept in the Wheel of Time, but it's way late spoilers, so I can't go into it because some people will be joining us for future Wheel of Time coverage.
All right, keep your secrets.
I've overused it tonight, and also I don't think it applies to the Wheel of Time. We gotta find a better line for that one.
So Durin's brother, is that, we're off book here, obviously. With there's a line of Durin. Right?
I'm sure that there's. Well, okay. So Marilyn, do you want to go into the line of Durin thing? Because you were the one who mentioned last night that it's not quite.
Well, I'm really foggy on it, and I haven't looked it up recently. Mm-hmm. So all I believe they give us is the line of the actual rulers.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how many siblings any of them had. I'm not even sure that it's noted anywhere. I do know that in the lore, it's Durin the Sixth who wakes up the Balrog.
Yeah, because it's in the Third Age. So,
right.
Look, I think the problem is we're dealing with annals, essentially.
Right.
And so you're not going to have Jeb Bush in the annals, right? Like, he's just not going to make it.
Right.
So you're not going to have Doran's brother in the annals. And again, like we are playing around with like who's around here or which generation is this. So yes, it is. I would say it's made up, but it's plausible that he had a brother, right? Like, fine.
Of course.
Probably did have a brother, right? Dwarves have families.
Yeah, particularly when they're, of the royal line.
Right. You gotta have a backup heir,
heir to spare.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing that I was not struggling with, but it just kind of hitched me up a second was, you conveniently drop that in at this late stage so that it sort of has maximum impact, as opposed to letting us know, earlier on with the conflict. Deesa's like, have you talked to your brother about how your father is acting and
unless they're not close at all.
True.
They did mention the brother. I think it was the end of season 1 where Deesa says, your brother is not going to wear that crown. You are.
Okay. All right. Good memory.
There has been one drop of the brother.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think just the act of disinheriting Durin probably implies there's a backup, right? So I'm okay with that.
Like I said, it was just a little minor hitch. And then, of course, we have another mystery brother, Isildur's mystery brother.
He's been name dropped a lot this season.
He has, yes. But I'm just saying he's there. There's this there's this brother out there floating around somewhere.
And I hope we meet him next season.
They're like, we didn't have the budget for this season.
House of the Dragon did the same thing with what's her name's son?
Daron.
Who's down in the south.
Which is funny. There's a Daron in House of the Dragon, and there's Daron, which is spelled exactly the same, but is a completely different pronunciation in Tolkien. And he was name dropped this season by Kiernan. Remember, he was trying to talk about like authors and whether the author rules the work, and he goes, Daron, insufferable.
Right.
Well, he was a tattletale.
He was a tattletale. David, I'm making you come on the podcast with me and Anthony when we talk about Baron and Luthien, so you'll read all about Daron.
Sounds good. I'm in. I'm down for it.
All right, let's close out this season.
Yes.
Oh, Day of the Dove. That's the episode of with the Klingons.
Okay. Right.
That's 7th episode of the 3rd season. So anyway, we can move on. We don't have to dwell on that.
A Valley Sanctuary. Here we go. Galadriel wakes next to Gil-galad, who makes a snarky comment before Elrond tells her they are in a sanctuary protected by the Elven rings. He gives her Nenya back, before Arondir comes in to ask for their decision over whether to use the sword or the shield against Sauron. Galadriel suggests they follow the words of Celebrimbor and seek light instead of power. Gil-galad raises his sword, and the survivors of Eregion cheer for the final shot pose of the 4 named characters on a cliff.
How do we feel about the final thing? I got feels.
No.
I had some feels.
No. You know why? Because they just did this with Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also criticized it like, all right, cheesy, everybody we know is on a tower and we're all gonna look out and look
with a
like
dragon,
we're very serious.
Yeah, in the sky and
make sure everybody poses. And now they do this. And also I was kind of bothered that they were like the sword or the shield, and like clearly they're following Galadriel's advice and going with the light instead of the sword, right? But then he raises the sword.
Right, and
that was
everybody
a
else
very
raises their
mixed
weapons.
messaging.
I thought that part too, John. No, I didn't see Wheel of Time, so I have no idea what the other thing was. But in terms of a set scene, I thought it was decent. I was content that they're finishing up what they can, and reiterating, as Celebrimbor said, it is not strength that overcomes darkness, but light, and the sun yet shines. This is so much of a better message than sometimes to find the light you must first touch the darkness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that we're getting away from that now. Thank you very much. Been there, done that, had that worked out for you. Not so great.
Right.
Let's see what we can do in the other direction now. So I see this as Galadriel starting to move more towards what people might think of as Book Galadriel. And this also upholds the possibility of my favorite scenario in my own headcanon, which is Arondir is going to take Galadriel back with him to Greenwood.
Yeah.
And along the way, she's going to stop in Lorien. And oh, by the way, maybe even find Celeborn and a certain elf woman.
And I think it's fine to talk about this because it's non-canon. Like, this is all going to be made up if we see this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, everything except Celeborn. I mean, he isn't made up.
Well, I just mean, finding him is made up.
Fair point.
He wasn't lost in the books.
No, she knew where he was all the time. Not to mention another character who I really, really, really hope that we see in season 3.
We are going to meet Celeborn, and he's going to say, "Tell me, where is Gandalf? Tell me, where is Grandelf? For I much desire to speak with him."
Let's hope not.
Well, they're certainly seeding this idea of these sanctuaries made by the rings, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And it was kind of weird that Círdan wasn't included at all
in
any of this.
And he's still got the other ring. He's still,
right. When they're saying this is protected by the elven rings, it's like, okay, well,
2 out of 3.
Yeah.
So, okay, we need to protect that harbor. So good on Círdan for being there with it. But what I want to know is where the heck are the rest of the armies from Lindon? Are they still marching down to Mordor?
Well, sailing? I would assume they would have
sailing down to Mordor, yeah.
Maybe they'll show up in Pelargir.
Exactly. Are they going to sail up the Anduin? And what? That was a little unclear to me. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope we see Ben Daniels a little bit more in season 3.
I couldn't agree more.
I think we will. He was in an Interview with the Vampire season 2 heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so delighted. I've seen him in so many things I like lately.
Right.
He's a great actor.
Yeah, and we enjoyed him a lot in Foundation.
Foundation. That was where I first really saw him. And
yeah, me too.
Fell in love with him.
I saw him there, then I saw him here, and then an Interview with the Vampire. So he's gonna be all over my discussions of top shows of the year later in the year.
Foundation should be out next year.
That's cool.
The internet speculation says that it's that the filming is wrapped and that it's going to be released in 2025.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hopefully
it's going to be a busy year next year.
Yeah, and this year was a cakewalk, so.
Yeah.
Last of Us, Andor, Severance, White Lotus, Foundation, Wheel of Time, Alien Earth. I mean, just to name a few.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it yet.
A few.
I know. I'm like, I'm bracing.
I'm not. I don't want to talk about that yet.
So I'm guessing that we're saving our season wrap until
yes.
next time
for the season wrap up podcast.
Is there anything that you guys want to observe about this episode?
I mean, I would just say I did really like the episode. I'm nitpicking this entire time, and I think the problem is once you break my immersion once in a show like this, I will start nitpicking.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode did break my immersion with the Peter Jackson stuff in a way that none of the other episodes did.
I think I agree with you, John, that there just seemed to be so many times. And I think it was just me, I said this before, but really wanting to see Elendil come into his own as his own character. And to have him imitate Aragorn to gestures and looks and the whole thing with the presentation of Narsil. I was really sad. I said, this is a missed opportunity. No.
It's also, we're dealing with mythic figures, right? And that's a problem. Like, there's a reason.
Sure.
There's a reason in the Wheel of Time they use this Age of Legends as this backdrop, but you never really see it much. You see like a couple visions of it. And there's a reason for that, is that these people were mythic, and I think it would be taking away from their legend to meet them, right? Never meet your heroes.
Oh, absolutely.
And here we are meeting our heroes. And it's difficult, and I don't envy the showrunners doing that.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I get that. Just they had developed his character so much as an independent person, and then at this pivotal moment, he's suddenly, I don't know, swung into the line of the line of Elendil. But he'll have plenty of time to do things that we haven't seen anything written about. So
right, I think they are on a good track now to have him forge his own identity going forward.
I agree, particularly as a father.
What does your cat have to say, David?
She says, "Pet me." She says, "Why are you ignoring me? Why are you sitting there flapping your gums?" And
why are you talking to someone who doesn't?
We must look like
psychopaths
to animals. We're just sitting there talking to an inanimate object.
Right. Why are you clickety clacking on that thing and not using those fingers to pet me?
So, any thoughts for you, David?
I think I covered it at the beginning, where I think they oversalted, or if you want to use your pancake metaphor, the batter wasn't stirred. And I'm trying to be mindful of not straying over into seasonal reflections. They had a lot to do in this episode. There's a lot of, they had to wrap up a lot of storylines. They had not a lot of time to do it in. So they had a lot of content that they had to compress, but also stretch, because there were definitely scenes in this episode that just seemed to kind of go on a little bit too long. Like that fight scene was pretty long between Galadriel and Sauron.
I agree.
And they could have chopped the back third of it off. And
Morphid wanted to fight, so you let her fight.
She got to fight.
They don't chop any parts of Morphid off.
No. So it was, and I think like you said, John, once you break that immersion, then we start to become aware of all of the little things that bother us and sort of are like, well, I don't like this, and it's very easy to go down that road and but still maintain a critique, a good healthy critique of it. Yeah, it was just a lot. They had a lot to do in this episode, and maybe it just got a little bit of the best of them.
And I think too, they started off with a perfect opening. I was so raptured by that opening. This is terrific. And then, it went along, and there was some great stuff, and there was a lot of jarring stuff. And I think for me, it was a bumpy ride. And that's kind of why the sort of uneven feeling. But
right.
Difficult task, as you were saying, John.
Very difficult task.
I mean, I just want to say, I think they landed the plane. I am really excited for season 3.
I agree.
I think it's going to be a great next season. I think they've learned a lot, especially since I know, Marilyn, you pointed out they really did do most of this filming prior to the airing, or they did most of the writing, rather, prior to the airing of season 1. So I think they didn't really have a chance to take lessons learned from that. And they still vastly improved. Like, I think not just us, but the whole audience has really turned around on the show, which is great.
Yeah.
With reason. We still get some nasty comments on our YouTube sometimes saying, like, don't like the show. And we're like, well, we're gonna like the show if we like it.
Seriously.
But I see, there's always going to be that toxic part of the fandom that doesn't want anybody to enjoy it, or a toxic part of the fandom that wants everybody to enjoy it when they don't, right? And that's the two sides of the same coin. Is like, just
sure,
you don't have to yuck somebody's yum,
and or yum somebody's yuck.
Yeah, exactly. And I think overall, I'm really satisfied with the season. We're going to talk about that on the finale podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything else to add. Does anybody else?
No, I think I'm good. We have a Lorecast to record now.
Yes. So, all right. So this is now a 3-hour podcast. Can I just make that clear? Like, we did a 3-hour finale podcast.
We just
crossed that threshold.
It's a good thing.
Which should tell you that there was a lot of good stuff in this episode, right?
I hope we didn't complain too much. I really do. Like, I'm a little concerned now.
But it goes to. I'll put at least my final thought on that, on the question of critique versus criticism, right? We're trying to critique and not just throw stones. Like, we're trying to approach it thoughtfully.
Right.
And something that I think is true about human beings is that we don't complain about things that we don't care about. You don't hear me complaining about the NFL because I don't care about it. What do I complain about? Traffic and pedestrian safety. Like, if you're going to hear me harp on something and get on a soapbox, like, that's a topic that
really,
I'm really, yes,
I've not heard this before.
Yeah, I've spared you all.
Thank you for that.
Yes, but because when we care about something, we're vested in it, and we're going to have thoughts and feelings. Sure. And when our thoughts and feelings when our expectations are thwarted or we're let down a little bit, then it's going to evoke a reaction. And I think we have invested in this season, and Marilyn, geez, a good chunk of your career has been invested into the writings of this man. And John has put in a lot of effort and energy, and we got our whole podcast started because of Tolkien.
Yeah. And because of this show, to be clear, like, we got our podcast started on this show.
Yep. So we care about this content, and we want this show to be a success. And so when it doesn't quite meet our expectations, we're going to say something. But I think we're trying to be professional and courteous about it, right?
Yeah.
So
good, not great episode.
Yeah.
I think a great season.
Okay.
And let's talk about it on the season wrap. But for now, let's talk about what's coming next.
Send in your feedback. LOTR@thelorehounds.com. Voicemails, please, are highly encouraged. And on the Discord, we'll have a channel there for everyone to share their thoughts. What is coming up, John?
Well, you've got a lot of stuff, actually. More Agatha All Along is, of course, coming. I know Aaron just put out a new Fallout Lore episode, so that's very exciting. Also, probably Howard surprise dropped a Penguin episode. Yep. They just reviewed the first episode of the Penguin, and that seems really
I have
fun.
a bone to pick with Anthony and Steve. They start off the podcast talking about the greatest bald actor.
I heard that.
So they had this whole conversation, like, what are the parameters of that statement and all that kind of stuff. And Anthony and Steve, you did not talk about Telly Savalas. And I think you did a huge, that's a major miss. Major miss. Anyway, that's my beef. Moving on.
Okay.
But it's a great episode. It's very funny. It's classic Steve and Anthony talking about stuff. So
yeah. And Alicia's been away, but I think she's going to get out soon for our subscribers, our recurring subscribers. Pray, our 11Zs for September. Then plenty more subscriber stuff happening on, there will be a second breakfast this month. And I just want to, a lot of people.
Put on your future radars. Silos coming back. So Alicia's going to be covering that with Luke on the Woolshift Dust feed link.
And they got screeners.
Notes. Nice. Good job.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I did, but I'm giving you the good job because you're a screener.
I was
expert.
like, you got screeners too,
You get screener wranglers, our screener wrangler. And then Dune Prophecy in November. I'll be covering that, and Alicia will be joining me. And I think we're going to try and get out some Penguin here and there. We might do a episode 2 and 3 podcast because we're kind of waiting for Alicia to come back. And then be done with Rings of Power. So my schedule will be a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
And then we've got lots of festivity. October, we're covering all the Poltergeist movies.
Yeah.
And then in December, we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff going on too.
Yeah. And I have a side project that will be on Lorehound stuff too. But
yeah,
I have another side project I'm working on in secret. So stay tuned for that. And I know a lot of people tune out for season wraps and they don't come back. So I just want to thank everyone for being with us this season. Whether you stick around or not, we are always covering something. We got a lot of content. If you didn't come back since Rings of Power season 1, we got like 300 episodes for you.
Seriously.
So welcome back, or welcome to the Lorehounds family. We're happy to have you, and we hope you'll stick around for future coverage.
Definitely. And of course, you can even stick around if you are subscribers, because there is one more Lorecast on the way.
Absolutely.
That is true.
And for the public, we will be doing a season wrap up that will have feedback. It will have Mark from Never Mind the Music to talk about his musical project for this season. It's going to be very cool.
It's very clever.
And then don't forget, we're doing that live show that I mentioned earlier. You can find the link in the show notes if you want to sign up for that. One more affiliate that I didn't mention was Never Mind the Music. I was trying to pull up their episode name before I got to it. So it's a sidetrack this week on why Nicole is a fan of grief. And I plugged it earlier. So
I didn't see that.
I
one.
described that.
Maybe that's what I was. Okay.
Yeah, that came out today.
Oh, okay. I didn't see.
Yep.
I haven't been looking at my podcast feeds today, so I'll have to go.
I listened to it on the way to work today. It was lovely.
Very cool.
And for those of you who are wondering about another affiliate show called Rings and Rituals.
Oh yeah, there's some show with a couple of Tolkien scholars talking about ritual and Tolkien's.
Yeah,
I was thinking things that are coming, but now, unplug that.
Well, it'll be coming, but probably not for a year or so. So if you don't hear anything and are afraid it's gone away, it hasn't gone away. We just need to let everything settle for a while and think about stuff and let it marinate. And, both of us having a variety of scholarly and other types of things going on, but it will happen. We just don't have a specific date yet as to when it will start happening again. But
have you chatted with Sarah?
A little bit. Yeah, we're both clear that yes, this is going to happen.
Great,
just a question.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing it, because it is such a great additive to the.
Oh well, I'm really glad, and it's just a lot of fun. I mean, and I was taking notes about all the rituals. There were a lot of rituals in season 2, guys. I mean, come on,
write in with your rituals. Rings and rituals at thelorehounds.com.
How about the stabbing your leader ritual, the mutiny ritual? That happened twice this season.
Sure did.
The orcs, they love it.
It was the alpha and the omega of season 2.
All right.
Should we get out of here?
I think we should get out of here. David, hit me with the thank yous.
Discord server boosters, the folks that donate their, nitro bits, I don't know what they're called, to our server to make it a little bit better.
I think they're called server boosts.
Server boosts.
They're just called server boosts. Yeah.
Gnarls. Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Captain Gingy56, Athena Ajalea, Adrian, Tina, Lestu, Nancy M, and Ghost of Partition. Thank you for making a better place for our community to gather. If you're interested, we have a really great Discord. We've got channels for all the different things. We've got a really great mod team that helps keep the server in sort of good working operating order. And it's just a great place to have that water cooler third place to interact with other human beings and to talk about the shows and things that we love. All of our affiliates have their own channels and everything. So if you've got comments, jump in. To our lore masters, our top tier subscribers, who are the cornerstone of our podcasting empire. Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwong Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Lestu, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, Fossey U, Neil F, Ben B, Charlotte M, Scott F. Is that a new name on our list?
I added it.
Hey!
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for joining the ranks of your fellow lore masters. And
welcome.
forever last but never least, Adrian. There's so many names on here that have been with us for so long, all the way back to our, very beginnings. And it's just really incredible to have the ongoing support of all of these people. And you guys don't know how much that means to us, both materially and spiritually.
Yes.
Our Froa and our Freya are both grateful to you for sustaining us. It is no joke, because we put a lot of time and effort into this craft. We sometimes lose ourselves, like poor Celebrimbor, into the depths of
3 hours and 10 minutes, folks.
So thank you, really, for all of you. And thank you to all of our season pass holders. Thanks for joining us on this journey. You guys have made that a really successful offering. And it's just such a great thing to see when you get those emails to say, hey, somebody subscribed. So it means a lot to us.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, thanks, everyone. We will see you on the season wrap.
Bye-bye.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.